Okay, we'll call the meeting to order. First item is to approve the agenda.
I'll move.
Second.
Been moved and second to approve the agenda. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. The agenda is approved. We're moving to public comment. The state board's agenda is full and may place limits on public comment based on the number of members of the public who intend to speak. I'll give each speaker 5 minutes or 3 minutes if there are a large number of speakers. At the end of your allotted time, I'll ask you to conclude and the board will move on to the next speaker. The department will not respond to public comment aside from requesting clarification. The department may place a topic raised in public comment on a future agenda. A topic from public comment that is not related to an item on today's agenda will not be addressed at today's meeting. Do we have public comment this morning?
Good morning. If you're joining us through Zoom and you'd like to make a comment, please use the raise your hand feature in Zoom. If you're calling via phone, you can press *9 to raise your hand. So we'll give everybody an opportunity to do that. And if you do that, I'll promote you to speaker briefly so you can address the board. Again, if you're present and you would like to speak to the board, just use the raise hand feature here in Zoom. Okay, and seeing none today.
Okay, we will close the public comment and move on to the director's report.
Thank you, President Robbins and Vice President Axiotis and members of the state board. Good morning, and it's wonderful to be with you all again. And of course, just want to start by thanking you for your service on this critical board. To jump in, the department has had a busy past week and a busy couple of months. So just this week, the department has convened the biannual STEM Council meeting where board member Dietz, who has supported and helped lead the STEM team since its creation, gave remarks about our shared commitment to a world-class STEM education for all students across the state. I also gave remarks about how the STEM team's work is critical to our agency priorities, including scale-up grants and the regional networks that are supporting those schools, those communities, those students, and those student groups who are most in need of support in accessing a world-class STEM education, as well as STEM teacher externships and the STEM Regional Teacher of the Year, which are efforts that help support our strong teacher pipeline, recruitment and retention into STEM endorsements. And then also the STEM BEST program for supporting high-quality work-based learning experiences and pre-apprenticeship programs and registered apprenticeship programs across the state. Yesterday, we joined the Children's Behavioral Health Systems Board, where we discussed investments in youth mental health, especially around youth mental health first aid training across school districts. We provided an update on the implementation of the Therapeutic Classrooms competitive grants, and then also discussed our efforts to support a culture of attendance among communities in response to increasing rates of chronic absenteeism both across the nation and experienced here in Iowa. And then later this week on Friday, we'll convene the Iowa College Aid Board, and we will have the third of 5 meetings in the legislatively established at-risk task force, which is charged with studying the current use of funds for programs for at-risk students and dropout prevention programs, the effectiveness of those uses of funds, and then evidence-based uses of funds for at-risk students and dropout prevention programs, as well as some additional components of the legislative charge. So we look forward to continuing that conversation with the dedicated task force. We've also been meeting with superintendents and education leaders across the state, including in the past few months, the superintendents in Heartland, Grantwood, Central Rivers, Great Prairie, and Prairie Lakes just last week. And in December and January, we'll visit Keystone, Mississippi Bend, and Green Hills, which will complete a visit to all superintendents regions and all AEAs across the state. I've also recently joined the AA Chiefs meeting as well as the UEN Superintendent's meeting and look forward to joining the RSAI meeting soon. And in all of these conversations with superintendents and education leaders across the state, we ask about their priorities, their needs, and then we also share our top priorities as a unified, aligned agency articulated in our meeting in August and then again in our strategic planning sessions. And as a reminder, those are evidence-based reading instruction so that every child is able to be a proficient reader in third grade. Expanding access to college and career pathways that empower students to earn a credential, an industry recognized credential or credit while still in high school. And then targeting those resources to those communities, schools, students, and student groups who are most in need of support, especially engaging in a robust discussion around our ISASP results, our trends over time, as well as our achievement among specific student groups and our significant achievement gaps among students with disabilities and students who are English language learners, as well as our NAEP results and our rankings across the nation in all students as well as specific student groups, and then our Iowa school performance profiles, which were released just this past month. And then finally, we talk about our fourth priority of supporting a strong teacher pipeline that is critical to ensuring that all of this work for the benefit of students occurs and is implemented. I also joined Albernet Superintendent Will Dibble, and that visit was really focused on observing strategies that led to significant growth in math in their school, especially among students with disabilities. Also, we observed a co-taught CTE and core course that received co-credit, marrying geometry and construction, which was really innovative and interesting, and is a model that I think many districts are expressing interest in. And then also we observed their innovative teacher licensure pathways and a homegrown elementary teacher who was pursuing full licensure in the coming semester. And then we joined Cedar Falls Superintendent Andy Petit and Principal Savannah Sweska to see how they have achieved a double-digit increase in their reading proficiency in grades K through 6, namely through the implementation of evidence-based curriculum and instructional materials, as well as the use of aligned diagnostic tools. And then what we heard over and over again is a strong focus on high-quality core instruction for all students with interventions as well. And then we joined Waco Superintendent Ken Crawford and Principal Emily Settles to see the implementation of their evidence-based literacy instruction interventions. They were implementing a new high-quality curriculum, and then had the opportunity to meet a teacher and paraeducator apprenticeship program participant, an associate who has served in the district for multiple decades and is now able to realize her dream of becoming a licensed special educator. So we were thrilled about that, and really seeing the fruits of that program for educators and for the students they serve. And then last week, we joined Storm Lake Superintendent Stacy Cole and Principal Barb Lang to observe their co-teaching model. So they have deep partnerships and co-teaching practice between their general educators and special educators and ELL educators. And that has been really focused on narrowing and closing achievement gaps, especially among students with disabilities and students who are English language learners. And then we met another TPRA, Teacher and Paraeducator Apprenticeship Program participant who is a recent Storm Lake graduate who is on her way to becoming a licensed educator and rejoining the Storm Lake team and on her path to realize her dream of becoming a principal in the district. So we were thrilled about that as well. Then in our core priority areas within the science of reading, we have invested, as we've talked about, in evidence-based reading instruction interventions. And last week, the department announced a statewide investment in early literacy professional development. And through Governor Reynolds' leadership, the department has invested significantly in high-quality professional development. Following a RFP process, we're partnering with Lexia's Letters, Language Essential for Teachers and reading and spelling, to up to 5,000 teachers and 1,000 school administrators at no cost to districts, schools, or educators. And to improve grade level proficiency and help close achievement gaps, educators who are participating in this professional development will master 4 critical outcomes for effective reading instruction. And those include a deep understanding of the science of reading, of course, converting research into practice, enhancing teacher effectiveness, and transforming instruction. So we and Dr. Brionic and her team hosted the first informational webinar yesterday, and we've had really wonderful response and interest to the opportunity. And the next informational webinar will be November 28th. And then we also recently held the Iowa Reading Research Center Advisory Council meeting. The department team shared the Science of Reading presentation that you all received at our last board meeting. And then we also discussed IRRC's efforts to support districts in selecting evidence-based curriculum and instructional materials and diagnostic tools. So that was a great, robust conversation as well. Within our second priority of multiple pathways to post-secondary success, we've recently joined the Iowa Business Council's Business Education Alliance to talk about how to facilitate strong partnerships and to continue to support strong partnerships between education and business, especially to expand access to high-quality, authentic work-based learning opportunities and student attainment of industry-recognized credentials and removing barriers to attainment. We then met with community college presidents at their fall retreat to share similar updates and discuss similar priorities. And then alongside State CTE Director Dennis Harden, we provided the opening remarks at the Iowa Association of Career and Technical Education conference. And then we have had the opportunity to visit some high-quality work-based learning programs, both alongside Boone Superintendent Julie Treppa and Southeast Polk Superintendent Dirk Holupnik. As well as, in addition to high-quality work-based learning opportunities, they've been launching pre-apprenticeship programs and have a registered apprenticeship program and multiple registered apprenticeship programs on deck to launch. So we were excited about that best-in-class model that we're seeing. And then very excitingly, Iowa was recently named top 10 in computer science organization by a national organization called Code.org. This is the first time that Iowa has ever been ranked in the top 10. And we now have 84% of all students with access to computer science education in high school, which is wonderful progress over the past number of years. And Iowa was also received an award from Code.org for its work to address and decrease the gap in participation among women and girls in computer science education. And over the past year, thanks to the concerted efforts of the department and in partnership with dedicated educators, we've increased the number of female students taking computer science courses by 273%, which is incredible growth, as you see. And then within our priority of targeting resources to those most in need, as well as addressing student achievement gaps, recently we released the Iowa School Performance Profiles. Again, just last month, there were 134 new schools identified as in need of targeted support and improvement, or TSI schools, as you may have heard them called. The most common reason for this designation is because of achievement gaps in the performance of students with disabilities. About 45.5% of the schools who are designated as TSI were because of achievement gaps in performance among students with disabilities, which is a robust part of our conversation with superintendents in those schools. And then you'll receive a teacher pipeline briefing later today from Miriam and Jay. But I also, just to close out, want to thank President Robbins, Member Hall, Member Kane for their work in reviewing and scoring our nominations for the U.S. Presidential Scholars Program. Thank you for further investing your time and talent in that critical opportunity for our students. The program, as you know, recognizes and honors some of the nation's most distinguished graduating high school seniors. We've received a record number of nominations this year, with 65 students in the general category and 62 students in the CTE category. The U.S. Department of Education will announce its semifinalists in April of next year, and then the scholars will be announced in May. And we look forward to continuing to have really robust representation in that national group of excellent high schoolers in Iowa. So that concludes my report, and happy to respond to any questions or feedback that you might have.
Any questions for, yes?
I just have one question. As we really grow the Science of Reading program, are there plans in the works to engage our nonprofit programs that support reading? So thinking about the specific programs that provide after-school support for students doing reading and so they understand the change in methodology, so they're not disrupting what's happening in the classroom and kind of going with the old way of supporting reading as opposed to the new practices.
Absolutely. That's a wonderful question. Thank you. We have been talking about that internally with the DE team as well as with the Iowa Reading Research Council, and how to support those after and out of school programs, which are already focused on making sure that they're aligned to our standards as well as what happens in the districts that they predominantly serve, and supporting them and also advancing the science of reading. So thank you for the question. It's a conversation that's well underway.
Just getting lots of questions about that. So I think even an informational webinar to help people understand what the program is as they're hearing about it would be super helpful, super helpful.
For out of school programs in particular?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Feedback.
Any other questions?
For the reading, for the science of reading instruction for the teachers, you said 5,000 teachers. About what percentage is that of the teachers that are in the state of Iowa? Because I don't really know, sorry.
So that we have about 15,000 elementary, is that correct? And then we've had really robust participation in evidence-based professional development among many school districts. So in our conversations with superintendents, many superintendents have taken the lead and already providing this training or similar training to it. So we're working to fill the gap in those educators who have not yet been trained.
Okay, so then pretty much all teachers will be trained in this by the end, hopefully, or something similar.
Our goal is to provide access, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Just one question, or maybe it's a comment. I was told that he's collecting data now as far as what schools are using for reading curriculum. Is that accurate?
The Iowa Reading Research Center is supporting districts who reach out to them in selecting evidence-based curriculum.
Okay, I see him nodding back there.
In our desktop, we are just collecting information, asking what they're using for elementary literacy, what they're using for elementary math. More of a just collection and nothing is going to be informed.
In regards to providing support in identifying what is evidence-based, Iowa Reading Research Center has been partnering with the districts who are interested in that support.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Anything else for personnel? Hearing none, we'll move on with the agenda. The next item is the consent agenda, which includes the minutes from our September meeting and religious groups exemption from school standards.
I would move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
It's been moved by Cassandra, second by Brian. Any further comment? Hearing none, those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the same sign. Motion's carried. All right, we have some rules. Thomas?
There he is. Ah, a hat today.
The Baylor women upset Utah last night. So
Okay.
So just a update about where the state board and the department are in implementation of Executive Order 10. Basic platform or basic direction from Governor Reynolds is a repeal and replace of every chapter rather than an underline and strike through. Margaret Buckton and others have requested underlined and strike through versions of these rule packages. I've had discussions with my job alikes at other agencies about whether that's helpful or not, what the source of truth is, what is the board actually voting on, the strike through and red line or the notice of intended action. I know that Community College Council last night expressed interest in the red line version that Community College staff prepared. But as time permits, those will be prepared at the adopted and filed stage for the rest of the rules and then at the notice stage. But understand that those are tools only. They're not the source of truth. The source of truth, the only thing that you're voting on is the notice of intended action. So apologize if folks thought they were expecting a red line version, but that's not the direction that I as rules coordinator received. So the red line versions will be cheat sheets, but when they're presented to you, it's clear that I'll probably put a watermark across it like unofficial. So it's clear what the source of truth is. So these rules have gone through the rules packages at your 9:30 agenda item have gone through a regulatory analysis, they've gone out for public comment. None of them received any public comment. So here we are. Largely, these are cleanup. I will point out when there's some substantive changes, and I will also point out for the 5 rules packages when the Community College Council made recommendations last night. So the first is Chapter 25, PACE, Gap Tuition Assistance Program. A couple of the flagship programs administered by the Community Colleges Division, really successful over time. No substantive changes. The only things that were changed from status quo to this notice of intended action is cleaning out some of the deadwood language that merely restates what is in statute, language that doesn't add any value. Last night, the Community College Council recommended board give notice of intended action on this agenda item. Questions about Chapter 25?
I'm assuming we want to approve these individually.
We want to approve them individually because some have Community College Council recommendations and some don't. So rather than a bulk approval, I think for clarity, an up and down vote on each of the 11 packages.
So I move to give notice of intent to amend Chapter 25. That's what you're looking for?
That's what yes.
I would second that.
It's been moved by Brian, second by Cassandra. Give notice to amend. Any discussion regarding the motion? Hearing none, those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried.
Next is Chapter 27, Workforce Training and Economic Development Funds. This is a small chapter based on a single code section, but again, it is a well-received chapter. It meets its public policy purpose. Through the regulatory analysis, there were some, again, language that duplicated statute. There was no recommendation from either the regulatory analysis process or the content area experts to make any substantive changes. The Community College Council recommended that the state board give notice of intended action to amend Chapter 27. And I'm open for questions.
Any questions regarding Chapter 27?
I would move that we provide notice.
Moved by Cassandra,
Second.
second by Brooke. Further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Chapter 32.
Chapter 32 is the high school equivalency diploma, colloquially known as the GED. This is an interesting rules chapter in that the subject matter experts through the alignment bill are now housed in the workforce development department, but the department keeps the rulemaking authority for the standards. So it's an interesting division of authority between the agencies. In the process of reviewing this chapter, I've consulted, the DE has consulted with workforce development, both content area experts as well as their legal team. Largely status quo and removing some of the statutory references, but with one substantive change to bring the rule into alignment with the statute. Right now, the statute for Chapter 259A for justice system involved for youth on who are in shelter, detention, juvenile probation, they're eligible to take and receive a high set credential, take the test, receive the credential, regardless of their age. The current rule disregards the statute and says justice system involved youth can take the test, but they can't get their credential until their 18th birthday. The historical rationale, which made no sense to me, was when people will get involved in the juvenile justice system so that they can get their GED and not go back to school, which, having met and known many justice system involved youth on a professional and a personal level, that was not the motivator for their delinquent acts. And it practically made no sense to me when I was reviewing it, and then substantively it ran head first into the enabling statute. So that's the recommendation from the department. Largely a status quo, but conforming with the statute to allow justice system involved youth to complete their high set regardless of age. And the Community College Council recommended that the state board gave notice of intent.
Any questions regarding chapter 32? Nobody's trying to beat the system?
Not yet, not here.
Thomas, is a matter of process. Just quick, tell me how this goes, how you work on this. Do you understand? I'm not concerned about content here. I'm concerned about process. So how does that happen? Is this laying on your desk and you're doing all of this? You have staff to help you with this?
A couple of the really administrative rules chapters, the ones that you saw last board meeting, the inside baseball ones like the appeal process or the rule about rulemaking, I took the lead on those, but these were content area experts. The folks who are now at Workforce Development who transitioned over there, they gave me some really excellent feedback before the transition took effect. Content area folks are the leaders of these reviews. So the community college rules, the Chapter 25, Chapter 27, Laura Vargason led that review. Rachel Bosovich has been of assistance in other rule chapters. So it's the content area experts, their voice is prime here, and I'm the project manager of it.
Okay, thank you. I would move that we give notice.
I second.
In chapter 32.
Motion by Mike, second by Cindy. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion's carried. Chapter 35.
Educational program standards for children's residential facilities. So just a little bit of backstory. This rule chapter is in response to a statute that was passed concerning a private unregulated facility in Keokuk called the Midwest Academy. And for those of you who are around when the Midwest Academy just sort of imploded, there was no regulation by either Legacy DHS or the DE of the children who were placed by their parents at this facility. And that led to some abuse of a criminal level and some fiscal mismanagement. So in response to that, the General Assembly passed the underlying statute, which leads to this rule chapter. There are currently 2 facilities that are subject of this, one in Kelowna and one in Bettendorf, college preparatory schools that have residential components. So it's currently has a very narrow application, but it is a very important preventative function. So after review, including consultation with Legacy DHS, with the HHS, as well as the 2 schools who would be affected by this chapter, no substantive changes were made. It is merely cleaning up the statutory drag and drop of the text. But for background, that's what this code chapter is addressing. Private residential facilities that have that were unregulated prior to this chapter, but now their educational component, students at these facilities must be offered education. This chapter sets out how.
About 10 or so years ago, there was a residential facility that came under, I guess, state inspection as far as abuse and other types of things.
Yes, that was the Midwest Academy.
So did I understand you correctly? We have 2 college prep program?
2 college prep, they're specially accredited, independently accredited schools, but they have a residential component. Since they have a residential component, they're subject both to Chapter 12 general accreditation standards and this chapter, since because it has a residential
I feel
component.
really stupid that I didn't know that. I mean, I've been here 12 years. I didn't know that.
And this really has this chapter has cleared out the bad actors. So it's folks who are committed to education and student safety. A lot of folks pulled up shop, pulled up their stakes and moved their business to states with less regulation of this space.
Any further questions or comments regarding rules chapter 35?
Out of curiosity, Thomas, how many were there prior to the implementation?
There are at least 4. And they've either abandoned their, just closed, or they've become more HHS regulated, where they're sticking to the thing that they do well, treatment. But this is, yeah, the bad actors have left the space.
Do you have any idea of numbers, Thomas, just off the top of your head? Did you?
Numbers of students.
Yeah, in those.
Dozens,
Okay.
but each student was at risk because they were unregulated spaces.
I move that we give notice of intent to amend on chapter 35.
Been moved by Cindy. Is there a second? Second by Brooke. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Chapter 36.
Interscholastic athletic competition. We have consulted, the department has consulted with the executives of both the association and the union in putting together this proposal. This proposal, there's some unnecessarily restrictive language regarding all-star contests that has sort of moved by its best by date. Remember the agenda item where you were asked to approve the association's bylaw amendments? I'm trying to get y'all out of that business. But one step of that is eliminating a requirement that they file their documents with the department. Unnecessary because they're already regulated as not-for-profit corporations. They're already subject to independent audit. They're already subject to that chapter. What could we do with the documents that they file with us? Nothing. But the biggest change is reducing the penalty for a failing grade from 30 days to 20. And that comes from the associations themselves. And that is designed to give equity amongst sport seasons. If I fail a class in a winter sport, I am out for the postseason because that time will continue in my redshirt period will continue into the regional. And if I don't compete at the regional, I'm not able to move on to sub-state or through the levels to get to wherever state swimming is or state basketball is. So for equity amongst seasons, that's why the proposal is to move from 30 to 20 to allow every athlete the opportunity to remediate their grades, to serve their period of academic suspension, but then still compete in the postseason. And then there's some clarifying language regarding burdens of proof and persuasion in production when an athlete appeals an eligibility decision to the Board of Control. Right now, a lot of those hearings are started like, well, the association never proved that I was ineligible. That's not how administrative law works. You have to affirmatively prove that the agency is wrong. So with those clarifications and then elimination of some unnecessary language, that's the proposal before you today.
This is a ubiquitous across the board. And this has been in place for how long? This disqualified kids for a 30-day period if they have a failing grade, one failing grade.
It's been since I've been at the department and well before.
Okay.
I would say probably decades. So Thomas, did the reduction from 30 days to 20 days, that come from
That was a recommendation from the two executive directors, correct?
and they could have made this recommendation earlier, at an earlier time or not, or is this just an opportune time for
It was the window of opportunity was open.
Okay.
But this rule, this amendment doesn't get us out of, they would still submit stuff to us, right?
They would still submit stuff to you. It starts the process of, because they have to amend their bylaws to remove the requirement that they submit
And
their
we have to
bylaws.
approve.
Yeah, so there's probably one more action, yes. But, I'm working with them about that. I think it's unnecessary. It's from a different time. All of their filings are available on the Secretary of State's website. There's no need for that. It's performative. There's no additional added protection coming through this process, bringing their amendments to you.
Is there a process, to follow up on what Mike said, I mean, we don't have to bring up typos and stuff, do we? You must have somebody.
Somebody already brought a missing word up to me. So if you see something, the submission deadline is after Thanksgiving. So if you see anything just in your review, send me a message.
All right.
If you don't send me, I'll probably see them. If none of us see them, the code editor certainly will.
All right.
But
If you see something, say something.
like at the airport.
All right. Thanks.
And the code editors do a phenomenal job, so they catch everything.
Okay, so any other questions or comments for the 36 chapter, please?
Thank you.
I move we give notice of intent to amend chapter 36.
Been moved by Brian and second by Nathan. Further discussion? Hearing none, we'll call for a vote. Those in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Chapter 37.
So athletic conferences, it's not just the Southwest Conference no longer existing. It's not just the Big Ten having schools in California, Washington, and Oregon. There have been some conference alignment appeals at the high school level in Iowa over the past couple of years, both of which have invoked this process. Query whether this is a process that the department should be involved in, but that's a question for a later date. But right now, this code chapter, the proposal is to just strip out the unnecessary language and leave the policy question to perhaps a legislative fix. Willing buy, I think conferences should be willing. Some people would think conferences should be willing buyer, willing seller. Last couple of appeals have been schools trying to force themselves into a conference, leaving a conference saying, oh no, I'm independent, and trying to wedge their way into another conference that had previously rejected them. So it's interesting, and I don't know if it's the right work for the department or the director to be doing. To what extent does it relate to student achievement? That being said, that awaits some statutory correction. Playing the hand that we are dealt, the recommendation is to strip out some of the duplicative language and leave that policy discussion about state government involvement in high school athletic conferences to a later date.
That's very helpful, because as I read through that one, it was like, really? What,
Yes,
no
really.
academic, where the previous one, right, was about their academic performance, limiting their ability to participate in sports. This was just literally
Which conference?
which conference or which school is in which, and I was like, okay. So thank you for clarifying.
It's, every time I read that chapter, I wonder why.
Using school.
Yes. So the recommendation is to,
And it does have maybe a potential variance with school and travel time and stuff, kids missing classes. I remember many years ago where obviously the department or the state athletic associations and union put 2 parochial schools in our conference. So these, because they didn't have a chance to compete with the conference that was.
Yeah.
But it did increase a lot of travel time for us and kids getting out of school and classes and this.
That's
Not
true.
direct, but it's.
Right? With consolidations and some of, the alphabet soup, the districts that have merged, you're right. The travel time has greatly increased, especially northwestern part of the state and other parts.
so the question really is who's best managed, who's best able to, who has the institutional knowledge? Is it the association and the union? Is it the schools themselves, the conferences themselves versus the department? So that's the policy question. These are tough questions for, travel time, historic rivalries, competitive balance. Who has the best information to answer those questions? The association and union or the department? And that's the policy question that I think will live to see another day. But right now, cleaning out unnecessary language is the recommendation.
This does create a traveling nightmare. And it's not just for conference alignment, but in district football or what you have, the more levels of competition you create, the bigger the nightmare. We have teams, 200 miles, travel 200 miles for a district football game, which seems pretty ridiculous, but I don't know what else you do. More people want more kids to get an opportunity to participate at state, okay? More classes then, but the more classes, way more travel time. And I guess they have to deal with that, the association.
But all of them want to get to Cedar Falls.
Yeah. Well, or commercial or wherever the state.
Provo for volleyball.
Did we have a motion for?
Yes, I move that we,
And do we have a second?
I will second.
Okay.
thank you.
I'm sorry for the interruption. Been moved in second to give notice to amend chapter 37. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor indicate by saying aye. Opposed? Same sign. Motion's carried. Chapters 48 and 49.
So 48, a good chunk of Legacy 48 was editorially transferred to workforce development in light of the alignment bill. There is one section, one rule in chapter 48 that remains. Chapter 49, no substantive changes, cleaning out some of the deadwood. But the proposal is to rescind chapter 48, transfer that remaining rule into chapter 49, at least for a parking spot. That rule fits more appropriately with chapter 46, which is the chapter on career and technical education. The chapter 46 isn't fully baked in the executive order 10 life cycle. But when chapter 46 is ready to notice, this rule will be editorially transferred either in the notice or at the adoption stage. This is one of the changes that rules coordinators can make editorial judgments without coming back because there's no substantive change. It would just move it to the remaining rule in current chapter 48 will be moved to chapter 46 when chapter 46 is able to accept incoming rules. But no substantive changes to either the rule remaining after the editorial transfer to workforce development or to chapter 49.
Excuse me, any questions on this?
Move that we give notice to rescind 48, 49, and amend 49.
Second?
Moved by Mike, second by Cindy. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
If opposed, same sign. Motion's carried. Chapter 61.
So, okay, I got my folders back in order. I dropped them when I was coming in. So chapter 61, Reading Research Center, Director Snow highlighted their very good work and how supportive they have been to schools and how crucial their products are to improving reading achievement, improving efficacy of classroom teachers. There was some same song, different verse, too much repetition of statutory language that didn't add value. The one substantive change in here is the rule currently allows the Reading Research Center to charge Iowa schools for its products, which is inconsistent with the statute as it exists, which does not authorize these charges and which requires professional development services to be provided at no cost. So this proposal to you is to bring the rule in alignment with the statute, and for districts that are wondering how their professional development could be paid for, this removes a barrier to school districts with limited resources to access this high quality PD. Reading Research Center has opinions about this, but they understand also that the statute is what it is, and the statute does not requires that professional development products be provided at no cost to districts. So that is the recommendation before you.
So to clarify, previously it said it allows them, so they were charged.
They could have charged.
Would have, or they,
It depended on the director.
okay.
Depended on who was the director, what the product was, what the principal investigator was doing.
Okay.
Has that director been flipped since this was created? Is it the same director?
I think there isn't a director search right now,
Okay.
but
And that was just, may I jump in? Sorry. We were currently in the process of the executive director search. The committee has been established. And then we hope to have that finalized.
Okay.
But nothing gets diminished by what they do. It's just that people aren't billed for it. Is that what we're talking about?
And where do we house that at?
the University of Iowa College of Education.
Yeah.
I move that we give notice.
Second.
By Cindy, second by Brian, to give notice for chapter 61. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Chapters 77 and 79.
So 77, the proposal is to repeal it and consolidate it with Chapter 79. Chapter 77 is the rules chapter on teacher intern preparation programs. The requirements, the content is almost identical to teacher prep. So the end outcomes, if I go through a traditional teacher prep program or go through a teacher intern preparation program, the intended outcomes are the same. The knowledge, skills, and dispositions are the same. So the proposal is to consolidate them into one chapter with different divisions. So the division that applies to all teacher prep programs, a division that applies specifically to the wrinkles of being a teacher intern prep program, a division for administrator prep, and a division for preparation of other school professionals, speech language pathologists, audiologists, folks who are non-teaching professional practitioners. There's a lot of duplication, a lot of drag and drop. The proposal is to eliminate much of that language. There are some requirements that the content area team who consulted with the practitioner prep programs before even bringing the materials to me for formatting, removing some things that didn't add value, didn't have like a direct relationship to student achievement or which seemed performative. An example is, a teacher candidate will comply with BEE requirements to obtain their license. Well, that's not our rule. That's the Board of Educational Examiners rule. So why have that as a rule if the Board of Educational Examiners has the authority to enforce its own rules? An appeals process. Every institution of higher education has an appeals process regarding grades, retention in program. There's no need for an appeals process specific to practitioner prep programs when every university, every college has an academic appeals policy. And then certain things for visits, such as like the curricular exhibit sheets, just because you have written it down in the syllabus doesn't mean it's going to be taught. That seemed like an artifact that didn't add a lot of value to visits. The team thought that it was more important to see instruction in action and to talk to professors, talk to student teacher supervisors, talk to teacher candidates rather than look at a syllabus. So those are those are some of the, a highlight of some of the changes where it's not necessarily code language that's been regurgitated, but language that really didn't add a lot of value. And that the fact that no value was added was identified by the internal DE team led by Marian Rodzavo, who consulted with the practitioner prep programs in the state. So the proposal is consolidate chapter 77 and 79, getting rid of an entire chapter.
I should have asked this earlier. What's the difference between rescinding a chapter and rescinding and reserving a chapter, since I presume we can add a chapter whenever we feel like?
So it's code editor stylistics.
Okay, all right. So there will be a chapter 77 with nothing under it, like
It will be
placeholder?
Yeah, it'll
Literally a placeholder?
Yes,
All right.
I think that's a code editor's preference.
Yes.
You do that instead of creating a new chapter.
right.
I'm not questioning the code editors. I want to get in their bets.
You're gonna
No,
all the numbers and
they're getting
Right.
that office.
Well, or if you just rescind it, then it's not there. It seems like you could just add it, right?
So rescind and reserve, it's the numbering, it's the numbering
All right,
system.
it's fine. There's a logistical reason
becomes
that
76,
it's above
yeah.
my pay grade. That's, I don't,
you can see a convenience thing there.
all right,
So it would mess with their webpage,
okay,
which is,
Sounds like a nightmare. Yeah.
all right.
the code editor's getting a huge fruit basket for Christmas. It's so helpful to me and to the team through this process.
I will move the motion.
Second,
Been moved by Cassandra, second by Brian. Further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor indicate by saying aye.
aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion's carried. Chapter 80.
Chapter 80, this is the fifth chapter that was reviewed by the Community College Council last night. They recommended that the state board give notice of intended action. This is a chapter that, again, there were many instances of duplication of statutory language where cross-references would be sufficient. The ed prep team at the department did a really good job of taking this out to paraeducator preparation programs. And they've identified additional things that like really didn't make sense in the para prep context, such as like references to things that you would find at four-year institutions. So the teacher prep program rules were used as a model for the para prep program rules without any sort of sensitivity to the footprint. Or the fact that para prep programs produce different outcomes by design. So the proposal would be to eliminate a lot of the references that are IHE, four-year IHE specific. That doesn't eliminate four-year IHEs from offering paraeducator preparation programs, and some of them have started as part of the TPRA program. But this recognizes that a paraeducator and a classroom teacher require different preparations. They serve different functions, both very important, but their preparation needs to be different. And the institutions that prepare them should be held to appropriately different standards.
I move that we give notice for chapter 80.
Second.
Okay, moved by Cindy, second by Cassandra to give notice of intent to amend. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor, indicate by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Chapter 83.
Chapter 83, this is the last of your Executive Order 10 chapters on your agenda today. This is Teacher and Administrator Quality Program. One thing that did not change was the teaching standards and the Iowa standards for school leaders. Those remain intact, but there is some language, again, excessive duplication of code language. There are a couple of things that done in this chapter in light of last legislative session. So striking out references to the Comprehensive School Improvement Plan, or the CSIP. There's no CSIP anymore, so there should be no reason to embed your professional development plan for your district into a thing that no longer exists. Additional amendments recognize some additional flexibility in using some of these funds that were created in House File 68, the ability to transfer funds from the TLC program to teacher salary supplement, to TSS, from one categorical to another. There were references to TLC funding. That additional flexibility was added into this chapter. But other than that, the teaching standards, the mentorship requirement, and the Iowa standards for school leaders have not changed. The rest of it is either mandatory responses to code language from the last session or clearing out dead weight.
Thomas, the flexibility that you mentioned with the categorical funds, that came through the legislature, right?
Correct.
So we're reflecting that in this.
We're reflecting this.
You're not making it new flexibility.
No.
Okay. Any questions or comments regarding?
Is there some attempt to dual credit this? I get credit for being a paraeducator. I mean, I'm going to have these hours and it's going to make me look better. And maybe I get a certification in that with college credit. We're talking about trying to take some of those paraeducators and get them into college and have them become teachers too. Is there any connection on these?
So that connection was made in the last chapter. So there are, so for chapter 83 is for folks who are already licensed teachers, already licensed administrators. These are the standards that they're held to in their evaluations, converting from standard to initial. But as far as the question about killing two birds with one stone.
Yeah.
Getting college credit that apply towards a teaching degree while I'm doing my, of course, that's part of the design of many of these programs where I can, my paraeducator training will transfer in, or I would receive credit towards my teacher prep program.
Okay. We're looking at chapter 83. Any further questions or comments?
That we provide notice of intent to amend chapter 83.
Second.
Moved by Brooke, second by Mike. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. All right, on to chapter 12.
So chapter 12, general accreditation standards, this is in response to Senate File 496. There will be 2 public hearings regarding this chapter. It's not an Executive Order 10 chapter, so 2 public hearings wouldn't be required. We're having 2 anyway, just because of wanting folks to have opportunity for input on these rules. So I'm going to walk through item by item and sort of conversion table to the code requirement. Item 1, page 3 is strike and replace wherever it appears, multicultural gender fair. Senate File 496 added age appropriate as a modifier to that string of modifiers. So wherever multicultural gender fair appears in chapter 12, item 1 would strike and replace and add in age appropriate, multicultural and gender fair. Item 2 defines age appropriate, and item 2 stratifies age appropriate into content for the human growth and development instruction and everything else. So content for human growth and development is a specific carve out. It can discuss human reproductive, human anatomy and physiology. That is a specific carve out, but age appropriate with exception to human growth and development means topics, messages, and teaching methods suitable to particular ages or age groups based on developing children and adolescents based on developing cognitive, emotional, and behavioral capacity typical for age or age group. It does not include any material with descriptions or visual depictions of a sex act. The statute defined what a sex act is. The rules incorporate that definition. A clarifying point that referencing or mentioning a sex act is not just a description or visual depiction. Item 3 defines what a sex act is. It is from the criminal code and was incorporated in Senate File 496 by reference. Item 4, bottom of page 4, adds an additional lettered paragraph to Chapter 12's rules on library standards. So 12.3 parens 12 is the general accreditation standards on libraries. This adds a new lettered paragraph requiring that library materials, the library program contains only age-appropriate materials. This creates an investigation process. And by this, this rule reflecting Senate File 496 for the department beginning January 1st, 2024, the department, if it determines that a school district has violated this paragraph by having age inappropriate materials in its library program, for the first violation, written warning, second or subsequent violation, if the act was knowing, and that's an important modifier from the statute. If the act was knowing, either a referral of the superintendent to the Board of Educational Examiners or a referral of the employee to the Board of Educational Examiners. A couple of rules of construction. This paragraph relates only to libraries operated by the district. So if it's a shared library program with a community college or a city, this regulates only those under the administrative control of the school district itself. Second, enforcement discretion. If a district voluntarily corrects or decides to get out in front of it when they've been noticed, like we've received this complaint, we'll fix it. If we are convinced, if the department is convinced that that fix is permanent, if voluntarily and permanently corrected, there's no need for a citation. That's uniform practice across all of the department's general accreditation standards. If a district voluntarily comes into alignment with general accreditation standards, preschool standards, and permanently comes into alignment, there's really no need for a citation. The problem's been solved. And then the final rule of construction, bottom of page 5, multiple grade length. A library in a single building district that might have an elementary wing, a middle school wing, a high school wing. The district is required to exercise reasonable physical, administrative, and technological controls to ensure that that shared K-12 library collection has sort of age-appropriate controls to ensure that the first grader doesn't access something that's age-appropriate at the high school level, for example. Final rule of construction that relates to the requirement to make available a comprehensive list of all books. There's a waiver process over the next 2 school years for districts that do not have online card catalogs. to the, put art card catalogs in air quotes, because I don't think there are anymore. So a district, if it does not maintain its online collection in real time, the mandatory minimum will be it updates it at least 2 times per calendar year. Item 5 is compliance with 27980 regarding instruction, a program curriculum test survey, questionnaire, promotion, or instruction related to gender identity or sexual orientation in kindergarten through grade 6. Gender identity and sexual orientation have the meanings given in the Civil Rights Act, and I left that a period. And then the monitoring enforcement of this rule, the department will not conclude that a neutral statement regarding sexual orientation or gender identity violates 27980 or this sub-rule. So if there's an observation regarding a book character's sexual orientation or gender identity, that stops short of being a promotion or instruction regarding. So that is sort of that's a safe harbor for classroom teachers, that a neutral mention is not a promotion. The final additional sub-rule is parental rights in education. This concerns parents receiving accurate information from schools regarding their students' gender identity or intention to transition to a gender that is different than that is listed on the birth certificate. If the student requests an accommodation, including a request that the practitioner address the student using a name or pronoun that is different than that is assigned at birth or on the birth certificate, shall report that to the student's parents. There is there's a little bit of caution by school districts about nicknames. And that final sentence in that lettered paragraph B addresses that caution. And like, I understand the caution that the statute was specific to nicknames, different names that are in response to an accommodation for a request to change or request to recognize a different gender identity. So Thomas to Tom doesn't implicate the rule, doesn't implicate Senate File 496, because that nickname, different name not on the birth certificate, was limited in the context of I wish to be recognized or I declare myself to be a different gender. Again, this sets out an enforcement mechanism similar to the enforcement mechanism for age-appropriate library materials, including the enforcement discretion if a school district or licensed practitioner voluntarily comes into compliance. So with that, the department's recommendation is notice of intended action to amend Chapter 12 to conform with Senate File 496. And I will answer such questions as I'm able. Other folks from the department, please correct me if I need correction.
Okay. Questions, comments regarding this?
On page 7, Thomas, it says for a second or subsequent violation of the sub-rule, if the department finds that a school district knowingly violated the sub-rule, blah, 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 blah. There'll be hearing conducted by the Board of Educational
Examiners. Yeah,
just saw it.
I've got that one already.
Okay.
Could you clarify, you mentioned, was this rule posted for comment like the other ones that we went through?
These were not posted for comment because it was a direction from the governor there was a direction from the rules coordinator to rule make. If we receive direction to adopt a rule, it does not go through the rulemaking moratorium.
Okay.
So the rules coordinator exempted this rule from because of sort of the time crunch of January 1st, at least having the notice out there by January 1st. The rules coordinator for the state exempted this rule from the executive order.
Can you see a circumstance under which the board here would be involved in all of this? Besides approving, of course, the changes are made.
Not for the discipline, because that's a department function. Department to Board of Ed examiners. Perhaps if was so ingrained that it implicated general accreditation standards. There's always an opportunity for an aggrieved parent or student to appeal decisions regarding library collections. You've heard one of those before. Your predecessors have heard them before, but this particular rules, the new enforcement mechanisms, the text of the statute, the text of the rule gives that enforcement to the department, not to the board.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just, so building on Cindy's question, what's the process for the rule moving forward?
The process for the rule moving forward is publication in the administrative bulletin, a period of public comment that ends on January 4th. It would have, the timeline would have been January 2nd. I exercised some discretion to add a couple more days to the comment period because who's really in the mood to do anything work related January 2nd? But it's the standard rulemaking process because this rule is exempted from Executive Order 10. It will go out for notice of intended action. It will come back either at your January or your March meeting for adoption and filing, including a discussion of any public comment that's made.
On page 4 at the bottom, and then over onto the top of page 5, as well as at the top of page 7, when it talks about investigation and like default penalty kind of stuff. I'm just a little unclear as to after an investigation concludes, it seems like then the school district or employee will be subject to, shall be subject to 1, 2, and 3. I guess I thought I was hearing that there'd be an opportunity there, or should there be an opportunity there for a letter to go to whoever the affected person is that says investigation shows that there's a violation of whatever the predecessor was, and you have X days to voluntarily cure that or face this, or this. I mean, wouldn't that, because if you got to go right to, penalty, that seems to up the ante, and you might have people saying, well, I don't want to mess with that. I'll comply. Is there that? It doesn't give you, it doesn't say, I mean, except for what you just told me, I would have read this and thought, well, if the investigation says I violated this, then this is what shall happen. If it's a first offense, it's this. If it's a second or third offense, it's this. As opposed to that little window that would give somebody an opportunity even after a finding, I guess.
Right.
I'm sure they had one during the investigation. Right.
So after a finding, there's no latitude.
Right, there isn't.
But pre-finding, pre-investigation, the rule of construction for both library materials and parental rights. Okay. There's some opportunity to voluntarily correct. That's discretionary. The department does not have to exercise the discretion. Perhaps if it's a repeated actor or somebody outside the circle of trust, it's a discretionary action.
I just wonder if there should be an opportunity. Maybe there's maybe there's a good reason.
So if there is a finding, then this shall happen. That's statutory language.
Okay.
So the pre-finding, pre-investigation opportunity to voluntarily and permanently correct, that's a rule of construction that we're proposing to sort of incent people to comply on the front end. Mm-hmm. But if there's a finding, then there's no period of correction. Well, the correction will be expected, but the Board of Ed examiners.
Could it be that we have concluded our investigation, we're prepared to make our finding, here's your opportunity to fix it before we issue that, or some. It just feels like this train gets on the track, and it starts rolling and nobody can stop it, even if somebody realizes that they maybe should have done something different. Now they're in a penalty phase.
So it's the line drawn in the rule.
I mean, I'm not arguing against this. I'm just talking about the procedure.
So the line drawn in the rule of construction, the voluntary discretion, is prior to making a finding or prior to making a determination. Once there's a determination made, it's locked in, and then the department has to make a referral to the Board of Ed examiners. Frankly, the rule of construction feels a little bit to me like going out on a limb. It's not in the statute. I think it's common sense. It encourages folks to comply,
Right.
but I'd be cautious about stretching that rule of construction, that voluntary enforcement discretion beyond the terms of the rule,
Because there is no rule of construction that's written.
that's not in the statute. That's something that the department proposes just as a matter of common sense prior to a determination.
Okay.
Once a determination is made, the die has been cast.
So practically speaking, the way that this would work is that there would be a complaint, a parent or somebody would find some material that they find to be objectionable. They complain to you at the department or something like that. And then you call the district or the school and say,
What's up? Yeah.
there's a thing going on. Are you going to do something about it before we investigate it? Or, so they have notice that there's a problem.
Yeah, so there are many pathways for concerns to come to the department. Site visits. I've seen some things on site visits that I probably if only I had been looking at the other way at the time. You can't unsee something you've seen. Parent complaints, student complaints, members of the General Assembly. Multiple avenues for these matters to be drawn to the department's attention. And typically it's a call to the superintendent, a call to the curriculum director, what's going on. Often, and not just in this space, often the issue's already been addressed and the superintendent, the curriculum director can show, we already took care of this, here's proof. If that's the case, there's nothing to investigate. That's voluntarily and permanently corrected. But that's multiple sources can trigger this or any number of investigations by the department.
Sort of as a corollary to that, there's a provision in here that districts shall maintain lists of what's in their libraries. Is there any effort or provision in this chapter or any other chapter to require either the state or I don't know who it would be, but a list of what shouldn't be or what is or is not age appropriate as these things kind of percolate and decisions are made? Because it seems to me there should be an opportunity for rather than going through every single book that's in their library, looking for something that may be objectionable, and then waiting for the fund, they should say, okay, this book, there should be, it seems to me, a resource or district should go to and say, these have been found to be objectionable. Shoot, we have it in our library. Let's do something about that ahead of time.
So earlier drafts of this or different legislation would have required the department to maintain a list. That requirement fell out over time. So legislative drafts. It never made it to final enactment. So since it didn't make it to final enactment, I'm not particularly interested in the rules coordinator as recommending it now. I think the more efficient thing is superintendents talking to each other at superintendents meetings or Iowa Association of School Boards, School Administrators of Iowa, the membership organizations sharing their collective wisdom with each other. I think that would be a more efficient way than a master list of books. That would have been one of the requirements in prior legislative drafts, prior legislative proposals that didn't make the cut. It didn't make it to Governor Reynolds' desk. So right now, there's no authority to ask for that. And I think that there are other sort of more efficient ways for superintendents and school board presidents to talk to each other.
Is there any, we're more bottom up on this stuff. Like if there's a problem in a classroom, you talk to the teacher. If you're not satisfied with speaking to the teacher, you talk to the assistant principal. If you're not satisfied, you talk to the principal, then you go to the superintendent, then maybe there's an appeal to the board. then maybe it ends up here. I mean, is that generally kind of what happened? This seems like it, boy, investigation, compliance, right? Right to the department, right to the department.
These two specific pieces are exceptions to the general rule, but they're exceptions to the general rule.
That's I mean, I'm not reading that incorrectly.
That the process is spelled out in code.
All right.
But do we not assume that that's part of that pre-investigation or element that takes place at the district school level?
Again, there's some discretion in how the department professionals, I'm looking at Bureau Chief Whaler, how department professionals manage these questions up until the point of a finding, up until the point of a determination. So interviewing the classroom teacher, did you really give this worksheet out? Did you really can I talk to your, let's talk to your building principal, let's talk to your curriculum director. That can all happen as in the course of an investigation. It will probably happen in the course of an investigation that leads to a determination. It also would be a part of that, the voluntary discretionary decision to voluntarily comply.
So might understand also that small communities that would share a library with the community, school, high school library or general library with the community, if my student checks that book out that's objectionable and there is a sex act in that. So as a parent, then I would call the superintendent, but there's no redress. I mean, there's for the parent then in that case.
There might not be any redress under this bill and under this rules, but there probably is redress as far as the interagency agreement between the city and the school or the community college and the school. I think that there are mechanisms to address that concern. How come my child was able to check out this book? Well, your child was dual enrolled for community college credit, and this was on the community college course reading list, and that's their curriculum, not the district's curriculum. So there, at the margins, there are other mechanisms, but it's books, library materials that are under the administrative control of the district.
And I see how cooperation could help, satisfy that issue. But with dual credit classes in place and pretty much across the state, I mean, I could see some real opportunity there to create an issue.
And that's why the proposal is in the rule that it's the community colleges are they're their own thing with their own mission, subject to their own accreditation standards, primarily adult populations, community members, credit, non-credit. So that's why the framing of that in the rule is whatever is under the administrative control of the district.
Yeah.
Other questions or comments regarding this rule?
I move to give notice of intent to amend chapter 12.
Second.
Been moved in second, just a comment. I did like the language about concerning a student's request to use a name that's different than their own. Just to clarifying that point, because that's been kind of I use a nickname with permission, so that language is nice to see in that. All right, it's been moved in second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Those in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion's carried.
Thank you for your hard work on reading these rules. Thanks for the questions, and I apologize for getting you off schedule. Normally, I'm the person who gets you ahead of schedule, so it all evens out over time.
I think you guys did hard work.
Yes.
Thank you.
Very, very well done.
We are going to, we're going to take a 10-minute break. No, about an 8-minute break.
8 minutes.
The, go ahead. We have charter and zone schools in the Iowa legislative.
My name is Janet Boyd, and I am a school improvement consultant here at the department. I have here with me Tina Waylert, who's the Bureau Chief of School Improvement. And this first report is this Charter and Innovation Zone Schools Legislative Report. And this is an action item. We do recommend that the State Board approve this submission in accordance with 256F.10. I'm just going to point out a couple things in the report. I'm sure that you've looked it over. This report, these are the charter schools that are authorized under 256F. And as you probably recall, 256F is no longer, you cannot authorize a new school under 256F because when 256E went into effect, then 256F, the schools that existed under that code still exist and are allowed to exist, but there's no new schools authorized under 256F. Also, we currently have two schools. And I'm sure you recall Storm Lake Community School District is operating a charter school, and then West Central up in Maynard is operating a charter school. West Central, you notice on the page 3, there's a chart there, shows when they were established and when they were renewed. West Central was the last charter under this code to be renewed. That was I believe last March, and then the prior March, we had renewed, or the board had renewed the Storm Lake Charter. Also, under 256F, the charter school is required to report at least annually to the state board. So these reports are self-reported to us, and then we, of course, report it to you. So it's a matter of them reporting. Some of this data we could pull, but they are required to do this report. Make sure I'm on track here. And I just want to, kind of note some highlights from this report. So you have the part that we do, and then we do make a recommendation, because a part of legislative reports is that we have to make a recommendation. We do recommend that we continue to examine the data for these charter schools as outlined in 256F. But then after this in the report, there's Appendix A and Appendix B. Appendix A is Storm Lake. And one of the things I kind of wanted to point out to you is Storm Lake is seeing some increases in their achievement. So on page 12, I wanted to point out the top page, that table 4, notice between 21, 22 and 22, 23, reading and math both of those on the Iowa assessments, both of those scores are going up. Wow. So just wanted to kind of throw that out there. Kudos for that. And then also West Central, I wanted to point out West Central at the bottom of page 19, their post-secondary credits earned by graduating seniors. They're seeing an increase in students not only earning 40 plus credits, but also earning AA degrees. So they went from 22, they had 6 kids with AA degrees. 23, they had 12 kids earning an AA degree. So I thought both of those items, just want to kind of highlight those because I thought, definitely highlights for those two charters. Any questions?
Will they continue to be evaluated under the, say,
256F, yeah.
the one they were established?
Yep.
Under? They won't, transfer into the new, there's no reason to do that.
If they wish to do that, they would have to apply under 256E. One thing that is occurring is that this law had administrative rules for Chapter 68. And in the process of rewriting administrative rules, and I'm going to look at Thomas, make sure I'm saying this right, Chapter 68 is going to get incorporated into Chapter 19. That is one change under this particular law.
This slightly off subject, but they had Superintendent of the Year, Stacy Cole, Superintendent of the Year this year. What do we do as a department to recognize, or as a board even, to recognize that achievement. That's an incredible school district. It is so diverse. And they have done an outstanding job. And I think it's very appropriate that she won. But how is it that we recognize these people that are doing a great job?
Jan, I
Can we
can
do that?
jump in.
Okay.
So one component was the opportunity to actually be with Superintendent Cole last week and
Okay.
to tour her school, especially a school where we're seeing co-teaching make measurable impact on student achievement and student growth, especially among students who are English language learners. I think in addition to that, relying on the expertise of all superintendents as well as the superintendent of the year is a top priority for the agency. If there are other ways in which the department would like, or excuse me, the board would like to engage, whether that be to invite Superintendent Cole to the board meeting or to organize a visit to Storm Lake, we are happy to help with that.
Yeah, and the latter might be a good idea, but yeah, I think we ought to do that somehow. Let's figure out a way to honor those people, either department or some board or both. You know, John, I understand your association or the superintendents would recognize Stacy for that, but to the extent that we as a board could do that, I think we should do that year after year. And I'd love to bring Brent. I mean, I'd love to tell us a little bit about your district, what's going on in your district and that stuff.
We do this for the teacher of the year.
We do.
That's through the Department of Ed, that program. This is through
Right.
SAI. There's also other administrators that are recognized too. The principal of the year and assistant principal of the year, and there's probably one other one as well. But it could be where we bring them in as a cluster to invite them for 5 or 10 minutes just to.
Sure. Those that, yeah, in each position, have them all at once and maybe say thank you for the great job. But just a thought. I'm sorry. I
Okay.
kind of got us off.
It's fine.
Janet, would there be any reason why Storm Lake or West Central would want to abandon their current code to move to the other code?
Well, one thing I would say, both of these charters, when they were established, you had limits. Senior Year Plus limited the number of concurrent credit courses, and that's a big part of both of these charters. That's no longer the case. Like Senior Year Plus used to not be able to be a full-time community college student and a high school student. There's not limits there anymore. The other benefit of a charter, this under 256F, you get a benefit of not having to meet 256.11, which is educational standards. So to offer and teach. So for a small school like West Central, the relief from those educational standards can be a benefit. They can, use their concurrent credit. So there's still some benefits to it, but not quite as many as there were originally. I don't know, the 256E application is much more rigorous because you have the two kinds of charters that you can have. So I don't know if they would ever want to go that route or just go back to what they're doing before.
Just curious. Thank you.
We did have a bit of a discussion about that with West Central when they renewed last year.
So you're looking for this report to be approved?
Approval of the report so we can send it on to the legislature.
Need a motion to approve submission of the report?
Move to approve.
Second.
By Nathan, second by Brian. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Those in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Carried.
All right, again, I'm still Janet Boyd, school improvement consultant, still the same. This report is for 256E. Again, it's a board action, and we recommend that the board approve this report so it can be sent on to the legislature. 256E, the report's a little more substantial. So I'm forgetting to follow my own notes here. So 256E, of course, as you recall, there's two ways to be a charter under 256E. You can be a school board, state board, or you can be a founding group state board charter. So there's currently, we have charters that are reporting in this report. So those two charters are Joyce Charter and Hamburg Charter High School. So as we look at the report, on page 4, the authority, of course, is 256E.12, parens 2, talks about this, them submitting this report and what needs to be in the report when they submit it. The two charters, of course, are Choice and Hamburg. I also noted in here, in the center of page 4, Horizon Science Academy in Des Moines was authorized by the state board. They are not reported in this report. They will report next year because this is the data is always a year in arrears. So they will be included in the report next year. So then, of course, I have the duty to monitor at the bottom of page 4 and the top of page 5, talk about kind of the ways we're monitoring these new charters. There's a section on how the report's organized for this report, and then the summary of the things that we have in the report. I also wanted to point out, there is a recommendation, I think I'm not there yet, but we talk about the mission and goals. And well, I lost my, oh, I know where I know what I lost because the recommendation is a little bit later. We do have a report summary. So this report's a little different in that we have a report summary of the two charters that we are reporting on this time. So our report summary starts on page 5 and it goes on several pages, takes the information that we got from the charters and summarizes it. So there's several sections that summarize all that data. And then we go on to page 14, we talk about findings. So one of the things that's a little different also in this code is that if there are corrective actions that a charter needs to complete, then we need to report those. So in the case of both of those charters had issues with offer and teach. And because the new law does not give them, they have, unless they waive offer and teach at the application time, then they still have to abide by 256.11 or offer and teach. So both charters had deficiencies in offer and teach. So that's outlined in here in page 15. There's a table 10 outlines where those deficiencies were, talks a little bit about it. Both charters have addressed those. So I would tell you they've addressed those. They've put courses in place, but you still have an issue in that when January comes around and we do the student reporting in Iowa, there is always a possibility because of their small schools. Right. There's always a possibility that maybe they didn't have a student in a course. Because remember, you have to offer the course and then teach, you have to have kids in the course. So there is always a possibility. They can put corrections in place. There's always a possibility that might still be a shortage area. And then, of course,
Janet, was the corrective action plans, was that just solely with offer and teach, or were there other?
Well, there was one other thing.
Okay, go ahead.
It's one other staff. So a charter doesn't get any relief from having, you have to have appropriately licensed staff. And you have to have certain staff members, you have to have a librarian. I think we even discussed this, choices are totally virtual. They do have to have a librarian according to 256.11. They did not have a librarian last year, so that was a corrective action. It's my understanding that has corrected that, so.
So I was going to ask that about the offer and teach. Can they offer it and then teach online? I mean, can
Yeah.
a student participate?
Yep.
But to your point, they can offer it, and then if you don't have a student that takes it, I mean, that's a little bit of a chicken egg thing, right?
Yeah.
So how do you hold them responsible for that? But they report it and how it's done, and we monitor that to see. And I would imagine just with the small numbers of students, it's
One thing I will say about Choice is their enrollment is increasing. I think that at fall count, I think they were around 130, and there's more now. So they are there, and that helps with offering.
Yeah.
Jenna, do you know if any of these offer and teach work that are not met? Simply because a student didn't sign up for it? I mean, do you know if any of those occurred for that reason as opposed to, just not everything?
Well, for example, Hamburg, they had issues with that regard. And, they had only one senior last year. So, it's really hard to get kids signed up.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I see that.
I did also, at the bottom of page 15, I noted the on-site visits. And I'm sure you recall last year when we actually reported to the board when we went on site, we had some pictures and whatnot. So there were on-site visits. Although that's not in code per se, it's a good practice. Good practice, yeah. So here's the recommendations. I'm sorry, got a little fuzzy there, but here's on page 16 are the recommendations that we're required to make as part of the legislative report. And, we're recommending that we continue to examine the data and make sure that the charter schools are meeting the purposes outlined in 256E. So then we've got 3 appendices in this report. The first appendix is A, and this is the template that was sent to the charters. So this is what we asked for. So in appendix A is what we asked them for. You'll see I've got my contact information on it and the different things that we asked them to do. Then appendix B is Choice Charter. And so their information is appendix B, and then appendix C is Hamburg. Again, I'd like to kind of point out some things about just a couple of highlights. One thing I'd like to point out about Choice is that they did a really nice job of surveying staff, students, and parents. I thought that was, that was really, their model is to serve students, the underserved, overaged, students for their 912 charter. And I thought they did a nice job of making sure that there was satisfaction at all levels there. So they've included all that data, which was, I was impressed with. Then I wanted to point out Hamburg, Hamburg, Iowa, I don't know how many of you have ever been to Hamburg. Hamburg's clear down in the corner of the state, kind of, it tends to be an area that gets flooded, when the Missouri floods. And economically, there's, this charter is trying to serve that area by giving students careers. And so one of their goals was to get kids in internship programs, and that's goal number 4. And they talk about that, they had, out of the 36 students, they had 31 students participated in that. I think that's awesome. We were able to go down there and see, they built a house, they're doing a number of things. So those were the 2 highlights that I wanted to point out. Any questions about this report?
So much about this report. Are there many charter schools we'll be looking at as far as new charters coming on?
List. We have 8 applications. November 1 was the deadline. We have 8 applications. On January 11th is when the board considers the applications. We've been busy.
Covering all parts of the state or kind of concentrated in certain areas?
We've got Cedar Rapids and Des Moines. That's what we're looking.
Not surprised.
I know last year that there was a board committee that was leveraged to help assist with some of the work of the charter schools, but I didn't see that in the report.
That was more, I did not report on that. You're correct. And I don't know the status of I would defer to the director on the status of that committee.
On the subcommittee of the state board?
And I'm not sure, you might, it was a state sustainability, and it might.
Under Director Aldis, I think we only met
Maybe?
Nathan and Mary, I think, were the ones that.
If I may, the charge of the sustainability subcommittee was a little bit outside the scope of this report in that it was not on academic achievement, but on just sort of the going concern or the foundation of, it was more fiscal and management, which is outside of the things that the two experts up at the end of the table were charged to address. So it could cycle back around if those concerns aren't addressed. Choice Charter is taking steps to address the concerns surfaced in that. So I believe that's, not speaking for the experts, but I believe that that's a rationale for not including it in the report. It's sort of outside of the statutory charge.
The other thing I'd say too, like, there's a lot of work that the consultants do with charters that, you know, it'd be a couple 100-page report if we put all that, you know, there's a lot of moving parts to charter schools. And we spend a lot of time working with the charters, you know, from just like CASA reports that they need to do and just all kinds of things that, you know, building and operating a school entail that they need help with. So that's part of what the consultants have been working with.
Sure. I just thought it would be nice to acknowledge the board engagement in the process over the year. So, because it was kind of a unique assignment for the board and an opportunity for us to be engaged in the work. So.
All right. So we need approval to submit this report.
So moved.
Moved by Cindy. Second by Nathan. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion's carried. Okay.
Thank you.
We have the school administration manager, Sam.
I should have Mr. Schillinger joining. Thank you. Thank you for your time today. I'm presenting to you the school administration manager authorization. Every program offering a school administration manager coursework leading to an authorization in Iowa is required to be approved by the state board. National SAM Innovation Project is the only one institution offering this programming within the Iowa, and it is it used to be offering this programming before, and sort of I'm going to give you a little history on this work, and this was the first time I've ever reviewed this program, and I will tell you a little bit about that and why. So early in the year, Thomas was reviewing the rules for review of the red tape review, and he sent out an email to several group of us, and he was like, who is reviewing these programs? And nobody knew anything about that program needed to be reviewed, and it was put in place in the rules in 2013. And in 2018, we should have reviewed this program because it was an approved program offering this endorsement. We had not done that. The OEE, however, was reviewing to make sure that when they were providing that authorization, like certification to the individuals, that they have met the requirements. But this was kind of left somewhere and nobody was owning it. And so when we talked with several groups within the department, we found this program more aligned with paraeducators or individuals who are being prepared to serve within the schools, and it was more relevant to what my team did. So we took the responsibility to work with the program, have them submit an application and review the program. In that process, I shared a template for the program to share their evidence of meeting the different standards that we have, and they provided the evidence. They provided the detailed course information and access to the course. And I also met with the program to ask follow-up questions and look deeper into some of the rubrics and some of the ways they were assessing the learning. So that was kind of the process, but I also looked at some of the data that they had used for improving the program, the feedback they had received from the administrators. And I tell you a little bit about this is the part that I love about my job. I just learned so much more about a program that I had never reviewed before. So the purpose of this program is to provide more instructional time for the administrators in the school. The administrators or the administrator managers are not required to be a SAM administrator, but if they choose to get this authorization and be determined as SAM, school administrator manager, they will need this authorization. And that's because the individuals who are working are following the specific requirements and rules to ensure that the administrator and the administrator manager and other staff are delegating the other managerial work that is responsibly allowable within the rules to other staff who can take those work so that the administrator can spend more time for instructional time, for feedback to their teachers and to work with the students. So that's a little bit about the purpose of the program. The individuals who go into this program, as they get hired, they receive their initial authorization, which is good for 3 years, and they have the time to complete the program. And then they complete the training. Once they complete the training, they can apply for a standard authorization. And then they can renew that authorization every 5 years by completing some coursework and credits that will be aligned for renewal. From 2014 to 2023, 148 individuals received initial license and 83 received a standard license. When I checked with BOEE on this, so many of those who had received this initial and standard license were those who already had an administrative license. And so my question to BOEE and the program director was, why would an administrator need to complete an authorization, which is a very different level, kind of a professional development? And they had a very good process that they explained to me. And so the administrators, or also those who are getting ready to become administrators, by completing this program, are working on some of those interpersonal skills and communication, time tracking and data collection that would help them do some reflection on their own work. And therefore, some of those administrators choose to also complete the training for their own professional development. And I'm going to go into the detail of what the different standards findings were. And I'm just going to give you just a summary overview, but if you have questions, we would be happy to hear more details. In the governance and resources, something that we check is whether the program has the appropriate resources to provide quality programming. From the evidence provided, it's clear that they have the appropriate resources and financial needs. They utilize state rules for when they are making decisions about delegation of the work. The Time Track is an interesting tool that I was able to look at the demo of that tool that will basically work like a calendar, but it also collects data on the type of meetings that were scheduled on the administrator's calendar. So it will give them an overview of what type of meetings they attended to in 1 week, in 1 year. And so it kind of gives them some opportunity for reflection, data collection on the type of engagements they have had. And it also provides some professional development and some templates for the communications that they can use to send out for the different type of meetings. And also there are some rubrics that are utilized for reflections daily, weekly, and monthly and annually. And then there are one-on-one coaching and training. The coaches work with the administrators and the administrator managers. And then the coaches also have training opportunities with master coaches where they would also have an opportunity to reflect and learn more about their responsibility and how well they are doing. So the governance and resources standard was met as it was included in the rules and by the evidences that was provided by the institution. The next standard is the trainers and coaches, their qualifications and preparation. The master trainers and coaches are all either have been school administrators, and since 2000, they have all been school administrators, but since 2019, everyone they have hired for this program to serve as a coach or a master trainer or a mentor, they have also completed the SAM authorization coursework themselves too, or they have served as a SAM capacity. The time change is utilized by all of the coaches, the SAMs and the administrators. And it has that assessment rubric that the coaches use to improve SAM's work, but they also use that work, the reflection for themselves, to work with their mentors for their own professional development and reflections. The coaches and trainers also have access to the online recording of they have an annual conference that they will have a guest speaker and they will have access to the recording of that. And in some cases, they're able to also attend that conference for their own professional development. The trainer and coach qualification was met based on the standards and the evidence that was provided. The next standard is the assessment standard. The resources provided was also again in that time track too. Something that I've realized is this program is heavily dependent on the time track and the tools they're using and the process that they have. So it's not just taking the coursework and be done. So there is a lot of the process and coaching requirement and completion of those hours of one-on-one and practice that is included in the program. So it's not a one-off or being able to complete a coursework and be done. So the assessment that was included was formative. It was based on the rubric that was shared. It had very specific qualifications of what would sound like if they have met the expectation when they are in level 1, level 2, and level 3. And so there were some very specific criteria that they were being assessed based on. And it is utilized. So the coaches are meeting once a month at least to review those assessment tools and ensure that they are using inter-rater reliability as they are utilizing those for their assessment. The program does, the coaches have reflection opportunities, and then the program also does an annual report. And we talked about that moving forward, we will be requesting some more specific data about the Iowa schools to be added to the annual report that they will be submitting to the Department of Education. The school administrator manager knowledge, skills, and dispositions included their knowledge of technology, their knowledge of skills in communication, getting back to individuals, interpersonal communication, the support that they need to provide for the kids, for parents, how to do some of the work that is non-instructional, how to decide, and also ensuring that they communicate every communication outside that they take care of with the administrator that they work with, so that even if the administrator is not getting involved in that process, that they still know that what has been some of the challenges or problems that they have addressed. So the knowledge, skills, and dispositions was addressed both through the course, through the rubric that was included. They are being assessed on that. And there was evidence that both they have been introduced to the content that they need to learn, and they were also being assessed continuously on how well they are functioning in those. With that being said, I'm recommending that the state board awards full approval for National SAM Innovative Project, offer the SAM Authorization Preparation Program until the next state board review, which is due on the academic year of 2029 and 2030.
Would your guest like to say a few words?
Mark, would you like to share?
Good morning. How are you?
Good.
First, I'd like to thank the person who just presented, Miriam. Thank you so much. It was really a pleasure, actually, to go through the process with you. SAM is a professional development process designed for school leaders to help them spend the majority of their day instructionally engaged. Your state was one of 5 states that we did the initial study in, starting in 2002. The initial work for SAMs was funded by the Wallace Foundation in New York. From the initial studies and research, now we work with about 1,200 schools in 23 states. We thoroughly enjoy working in Iowa. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer. I can also show you a West Des Moines time track if you'd like to see it from Indian Hills, principals given permission. So if you'd like that, I'd be happy to, but mostly I just want to say thank you, Miriam. It was really wonderful working with you.
So Mark, again, just maybe help me understand this better. So what we're trying to do is relieve administrators in their schools so that they have more time to focus on instruction and curriculum and less time on discipline, things like that. So we're training people to be SAMs to alleviate these administrators. That's one thing, right?
Sort of. The SAM process was designed to see if you could change the culture in a school where the principal could manage the management work and be able to spend the majority of their time doing instructional leadership work. This does not mean the principal's not responsible for the management. They obviously are. So in a school like Indian Hills, if you were to call the school and say, I need to talk to the principal, we train the office staff to say, we know the principal would like to talk with you. And then they can click one button to see when the principal's available. But they can click another button to show who could give that person help faster. That person has to be trained to be the first responder, so they do it in the way the principal would like. Here's the thing, you have to keep in mind the principalship was never designed to be an instructional position. It wasn't until about 1982 you could find in the literature the term principal and instructional leader in the same sentence. In the 80s and early 90s, there was enough research that showed that if you could get the principal to actually spend quality time working with teachers, not evaluating so much, but coaching teachers frequently, you had a huge impact on student achievement. So that's why I, as a former superintendent, when asked by the Wallace Foundation, would you like to quit being a superintendent for a while? You can study anything you want. I picked this question. Could you actually create a culture in a school where a principal spends the majority of their time doing instructional leadership work? Let me show you a principal in your state who started doing this 8 years ago, and the amount of time he was spending instructionally was 10% of the day. By the way, the national average is 13%, if you're wondering. So I'm going to share my screen quickly with you. These are the 4 non-negotiables in the SAM process. The SAM usually is a secretary, sometimes an assistant principal. They agree to sit down with the principal every day and essentially do a lesson plan, both for the management and instructional work that the principal wants to do. They do that ahead of time. And the next day they have that meeting again. They look and see what the principal did the day before and what follow-up you'd like. So let's see how this translates in terms of practice. This is Shane Christensen. He's a middle school principal in West Des Moines. This is his time track. If you look at the bottom of today, you'll see the time he's spending instructionally engaged, 73% of his day. The green events are things that he intends to be instructional. When I double click one of his events, I can see he was doing this team meeting and he has the people he did it with. The next day, his SAM will say, did you go to this meeting? And he'll say, yeah, I did, we assume. And then the SAM would say, what follow-up do you want? The intent here is to get the principal not just to be in classrooms, but to be in classrooms, have feedback conversations, and be able to have data that they can use to see if they're actually moving practice forward. So I'll stop there unless you have a question, because I know you are approving or you're considering approval of continuing the certification process for SAMs in your state. The certification process means that your state has specific rules at how these people must be trained.
That's very helpful, Mark. Initially, this was done through a grant, but now if you want SAMs in, there's additional money involved in that process. It's the school's responsibility to pay for that. Is that correct?
Yes, when I was a superintendent and was offered the opportunity to study what I'd like to through the Wallace Foundation in 2002, this is what I wanted to study. They gave us a certain amount of money to do an initial study in Louisville, Kentucky, and we did it in 21 schools. Then a superintendent from your state was really interested. Her name is Carol Lenzing. She now serves on our board. She said, couldn't we try this in another place too that's different than Louisville? So the Wallace Foundation allowed us to try it in 150 schools in 5 different states. There was 8 more years of research done on SAMs to determine if this really makes a difference. Vanderbilt University, Policy Studies Associates, and RAND Corporation. And here's what the research showed. Every principal who did this was happier. Every principal went from about 20% of their time instructionally engaged on average to about 60%. They could see an increase in student performance tied to the work of the principal's change of practice, and they saw that teachers liked their principal better. The Wallace Foundation then said, well, Mark, you're going to be a superintendent again. And I said, no, we're going to start a nonprofit and you're going to help us, and we're going to sell services across the country. So we now work with about 1,200 schools in 23 states, big cities like New York, small places all around the country. People pay for the service. Yours is the only state that has a certification piece for the SAM. We have a very strong training regimen that we do for every SAM in any place we work, whether it's California or district-wide projects like in Orlando, Florida. Your state is kind of ahead of the curve because you created a series of steps that we must follow in order to certify or give accreditation to a SAM. Most SAMs are secretaries, but you might be interested to know that it's really an employee development process because the SAM every day is sitting and working with the principal. In the school I showed you a moment ago, Indian Hills, not only does the principal do SAMs, so does the instructional coach, so does the assistant principal, and they can merge their data. So they can pull up a chart to see what they've done with a particular teacher, but then they can merge in what the other people working to help that teacher are doing as well. It really is a reflective practice process to help the principal to be more effective in their key role, improving teacher practice and student performance. And what's kind of fun about it is it works everywhere we do it. You also might be interested to know that we have 2 SAMs who started out as secretaries in 2005 who are now principals. Because they got so into this, they went back and got their teaching certification, then got their leadership license, and now do the SAMs process as SAM principals.
Mark, thanks. That's very helpful.
Okay, thank you. Entertain a motion.
So moved.
Moved by Sandra,
Second.
second by Brooke. To approve preparation program. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion's carried. We do have lunch here. It is a hot lunch. So if we can we move the Heartland, Grantwood approvals and the community college report to after lunch?
Sure, I can and if the program's members are not able to join, I will be happy to present everything that I know. And if there are questions, we can follow up with them too.
Well, let's move those. Jeremy, is that okay? Yeah. Okay. Let's move to lunch since it is a hot lunch today and it's here. And let's reconvene at 5 minutes till 12. Thank you. Reconvene.
Right, I'm bringing to you Heartland AEA Paraeducator Preparation Program. They are renewing their program. Their previous renewal was in 2018. So they were still on that 5-year cycle. And because of that, we have continued to do that until we are done with that cycle. They started this approval process in January. And the program was reviewed with by several people, including one of the program consultants, Kelly Pega, and also Jerry McMahon from DOEE. Kelly had reviewed the program based on Chapter 80, which is Department of Education. And then Bureau of Educational Examiners have its own standards on the competencies. So Jerry also supported reviewing those competencies and knowledge, skills, and dispositions for this program. Okay, we have the program representatives also in here, so that's great. I'm going to make it very summarized as I'm presenting to you because you have a report in front of you that has a summary of what we have found in each standard. But if you have any question you would like us to expand more, please let us know. I can start that one of the goals of the Heartland AEAs listed was empowering paraeducators with skills, providing them with capacity and understanding to understand the individual needs, prepare them well for employment, and to work with diverse population, adapt to various settings, and foster professional relationships, and uphold ethical responsibility. Heartland AEA is requesting approval of the renewal of their programs in offering a generalist certification, but they also offer concentration areas in early childhood, special needs, the early childhood from pre-kindergarten to grade 3, pre-kindergarten to grade 12, English as a second language, pre-kindergarten to 12, and school library media, pre-kindergarten to 12. Just a little bit information on those of you who may not have approved. I think everybody have approved the program here, so I'm not going to bore you with repetitive information here. The governance and resources standard, the appropriate resources was provided. They have the support professionals and staffing that is required for a program to sustain. They have individuals who are hired to teach for them, who are qualified. They provide laptops and technology and also support to the candidates in the program. And they also utilize feedback from candidates to generally improve those resources that they provide to the candidates. The diversity, this standard was met. The diversity standard, they included the policies that shows that they are providing equal opportunities for employment. And also they work with pre-K to 12 diverse students in the program as they are engaged. They also shared some resources on multimedia and resources they shared to communicate the professional developments that they offer at the AEA with the individuals in the district. So they communicate the programs and offerings that they have with the administrators. They post it on their social media, and they try to encourage paraeducators to take these classes for the professional development. As you know, paraeducators in Iowa are not required to have a paraeducator certification, but this just prepares them better for what they do. And if they do the concentration areas, it even helps them to work with those specific needs of the individuals they work with. So the diversity standard was met based on the standards that we have in Chapter 80. Faculty standard requires that their faculty are qualified and they have the expertise and knowledge and skills that are relevant to the teaching assignment. Their faculty members, they shared the CV of the faculty members and they were qualified. They have currently they also use paraeducator surveys to assess the effectiveness of the instructors and also the coursework and to utilize that for the improvement. And they also offer professional development to the faculty members within their program. The assessment included the candidate assessment, so included journals, testing, feedback that they received, both summative and formative. They use that data for both program improvement and for the course improvement at the end of each course when the courses were taught. So the assessment standard was met, and the clinical standard included some diverse experiences for the candidate. They were required to have conversation with their teacher of record and receive feedback. They had recorded documents and evidence that they have completed the field experience as needed. The field experience requirement in the paraeducator program is only 10 hours, but normally those candidates get to do more than that because they are serving in paraeducator roles. But if they are not, they were able to show that they have at least completed that requirement of the program. If you have any questions, we would be happy to answer. Otherwise, I'm recommending that the state board approve the Heartland AEA agency paraprofessional programs through the next review scheduled for 2020, 2030 and 2031 academic year.
So move.
Second?
Been moved by Mike and second by Cindy. Any further discussion? Hearing none, call for a vote. Those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Same sign. For opposed? Motion carried. Congratulations.
Thank you. And the next one is Grantwood AEA. They also have a program approved, the renewal of their program that is already approved. They only offer generalist certification. Some of the areas that they highlighted about the program, ensuring that they offer high-quality professional development to meet the needs of the customers and the schools, basically, and the districts that they're serving. The generalist certification is offered to ensure meaningful and relevant and current content to the paraeducators serving within the district. They mentioned that their mission is to ensure that ensure success of all learners. I'm going to go into the how they met the different standards. The organization and resources standard was met. They accommodate working adults in this program, so they do offer synchronous classrooms and some Zoom meetings that are brief, but they also offer the self-paced coursework that they can complete on their own time. They offer office hours and support for the individuals who are completing those self-paced courses. Those courses are still reviewed by the instructors who are qualified. The organization and resources, they have the staff and resources that they need for the program to function successfully, so it was met. The diversity standard is focused on some of the areas that was mentioned. Their material in the coursework review was in the assignments showed that they do introduce the candidates into those different diverse categories and how to work with diverse learners. They included those work with diverse candidates in different assignments also, like journals, quizzes, and writing strategies and professional development that they provide. They also provide professional development specifically to diversity for all the staff that they have at the AEA and also beyond that. And they also offer micro-credentials on those, for those who are completing those professional developments on diverse experiences. So that standard was also met. They have this diversity standard is always an interesting standard that we have. We have two specific areas that do they have the rules and basically the policy that they are hiring. Their hiring is on best practices and they're inclusive, and whether the candidates have had some opportunities of diverse. But then we also look at diversity in the knowledge, skills, and disposition. So I just want you to know that there are also some areas that they learn to work with those different individuals with different needs in the knowledge, skills, and disposition. So every time we bring that diversity standard to you, I'm always interested to say, you know, there is more than what is just in this standard that the programs are doing. Their faculty, they had submitted again their CV. They have aligned teaching duties and experience and the preparation. They currently have former special ed consultant, so that's a great strength that somebody with that experience is teaching those courses. The professional learning and credentials are offered, but they also receive the feedback from those individuals who have completed this program, both the ones who are completing it now and those who have graduated before. So they get that feedback and also work with the faculty to integrate that in their coursework. Their faculty were qualified and they are completing the professional development and they have the engagement that they are required to have in the K-12 similar settings. So that standard was also met. The assessment standard, they do track the candidates' logs and they assess the candidates' clinical experiences. They assess the candidate progress throughout the courses. There are 3 courses that they offer, and they track the candidate's progress throughout that. They give them feedback in the different assignments and throughout the courses. And so the assessment standard was also met because they also utilize that data that they get from the candidate specific assessment to improve the program in general. So it was an inclusive assessment. The clinical standard, again, it is a related assessment. It is an assessed clinical of minimum at least 10 hours of working in a classroom where there is a paraeducator need and there's other paraeducators. They do receive at least minimum of 5, they have to have at least 5 conversations with their cooperating teachers and get feedback from them on how they can improve their work with the individuals that they work with. And so for the 10 hours, it is a great opportunity that they provide for their candidates, and they assess and give them feedback on how they can improve that work. So that standard was also met. They do the reflections as well.
If I can interrupt you just a second. So do any of the schools require that associates take these classes before they're actually in the classroom? Or are all of these as a result of them taking the job and then having requirements? I'd be interested to know if you have to do anything before you take a job.
For some of the paraeducators who are on a specific title programs, there might be some specific needs. So those schools who are using, they may need highly qualified paraeducators. In those cases, they may require that to be a case. Statewide, I'm not aware of any rule that would require them to. So if a district hires a paraeducator who has not completed this, they are still in compliance with the state rules.
Okay. So you don't know of any schools that actually say, before you take this class, or before you help with this class, you have to have this kind of training?
I know that a lot of schools recommend it, but I also know that there are a lot of paraeducators. This is based on a conversation with one of the AEAs, that some of the paraeducators who complete this coursework, they don't approach getting the certification because the district doesn't necessarily recommend that.
Okay.
Miriam, I can speak to that a little bit for Grant Wood.
Sure.
Okay. Hi, hello, everyone. I'm Nicole Brown. So I'm the professional learning coordinator for Grantwood AEA and oversee our para program. So we actually we serve and support 32 public school districts. And we actually contacted all of them to ask that very question, like, do any of you require people that you're hiring into your paraprofessional positions to have their certification ahead of time? And all 32 were no. And basically it's because it starts to shrink the pool, and paras are a pretty high need profession in our school districts. I will say that there are some districts that once they have hired, they will pay for a person in a paraeducator role to receive their certification, which is a really amazing thing that they're able to do for those people. So that's what we know from the little bit of research that we did this year.
Do you have any link between that and college credit? Is your AEA? There's no link, no linkage.
Not for paraeducators, no. Mm-mm.
Thank you. Thank you.
Just to supplement, that's been my experience in our part of the state too, is with the pool kind of tight. But I think there's a number of school districts that will pay paraeducators an additional stipend if they are taking coursework and past that.
Yes, I would say the same thing. That's really an incentive for people to receive their paraeducator certifications, is there typically is a pay bump for them if they have that.
Mr. May, in response to your question, Amy, can you talk a little bit about the para programs at community colleges and how they attain credits?
Yeah, there are a number offered through our community colleges that do offer credit, and we're doing a lot on the community college side to align the non-credit and the credit side. So I think there's even some more opportunity to align the non-credit ADA programs with credit at the community colleges. We just started that kind of path
Really like
to
that.
more alignment.
I really like that.
Yeah.
You can tell. I
But
really.
then we do offer some credit
Okay.
programs at the community colleges.
Thank you.
When you talking about alignment at the community colleges, so if someone had maybe taken a non-credit course, could they get credit for that at the community colleges? Is that what you're saying? Like they wouldn't have to retake the course or retake something
They're
else?
all described under the umbrella of prior learning assessment, but there's a number of ways you can take non-credit experiences and apply credit. Trying to do it at the actual programmatic level with these, pathways with our guided pathways initiative, but that there are specific pathways from non-credit degrees to credit degrees.
For the educator preparation programs, also those who offer paraeducator certification, we encourage them to look at what is already in their educator preparation program, because a lot of these competencies are already what a teacher will complete. So foundation of education, learning about working with diverse candidates, they already were offering that to the educator candidates. So they aligned their paraeducator certification so that those courses are towards that teaching licensure, counting for both with no problem. Of course, they are meeting both programs' need.
Anybody else have a question? I'll keep going. Otherwise, I'm sorry. I'm just, again, curious about that. Do we make recommendations? I mean, when we do teacher prep programs, generally we have some recommendations that we make to each of those programs. Do you do that? And could that be included in this? I'd like to see what it is next time, next time.
Absolutely.
That these are recommendations that we make, and maybe some of the things that we're talking about today could be included in that report and encourage them, along those lines and others. I mean, I'm not saying that's the only issue. I'm just suggesting that I like that when I see those suggestions that these are things that would really help with thinking.
Well, I would be happy to. And we did make a lot of recommendations. And actually, that's why last year, you remember, you approved about like 8 or 9 programs that just started to offer that. And that was as a recommendation that we made to the programs. We cannot require that, but we made the recommendation that this is part of the process. It's a good way to get the paraeducators in their feet in the door, and also to encourage them to complete that education then towards a teaching licensure. So with the TPRA also, that was a good opportunity for us to emphasize that strength of that program and opportunity. The department also provided grants for educators. Last year, we programs prepared over 1,000 paraeducators in these programs utilizing those grants and then we are now tracking to see how many of those paraeducators will continue to go to complete their teaching education.
Thank you very much.
Other questions or comments? I'll call for a motion.
So moved. We accept the
Grant Wood.
Grant Wood.
Second.
Moved by Cindy. Mike, did you second?
Yes.
Okay, Mike second. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion is passed. Congratulations.
Thank you.
All right, fall enrollment. That's some good news for us.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. See you, thank you.
It is afternoon.
It is, yes. Originally scheduled for morning. I'll be brief. I understand that you've got a little time to make up. I'll do my best.
Got like 3 Jeremys in the background. That was like 3. There was 2 on the screen and another on the screen. That was kind of cool, Jeremy. That's it.
I don't like to be on, it's big, right? It's huge. Yeah, that's, oh, you got it? Okay, awesome. Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you for having me here today. I'm going to talk with you a little bit about our fall community college enrollment. As you may recall, those of you that have been on the board for a while, we collect fall enrollment each fall on the 10th day of class, the 10th business day, through our community college MIS. So I'll be talking today about credit enrollment. Basically, the thing to know here, right, is this is our freshest data. This is the current term students enrolled this fall. We're going to come back to you in January with our flagship Condition of Community Colleges report. That'll be the prior fiscal year. That covers all things that the community colleges are doing in fiscal year 22-23. It'll be kind of in the past, more comprehensive, deeper, covers the non-credit, the HR, the financials, everything. This is fresh data, the current term, so you can see trends and kind of get useful insights out of that. And it's still extensive. Our community colleges enroll more students than any other sector of higher education by a healthy margin. So there's a lot to look at here. I do have Vlad Basas, who puts together this report. He's leads our community college data team to answer any technical questions if you want to dig into the weeds. Otherwise, I'll walk you through the key takeaways. So first, I'd like to note that fall enrollment is up 3.8% to 85,162 students. As you may recall, it was up just a bit last year after a number of years of decline. It would have been essentially declining since our peak enrollment in 2010, kind of coming off the recession, right? So community college enrollment is in part counter-cyclical. That labor market, we've been kind of continuing to see enrollment slide. Last year, we started to see it tick up. This year, we saw it tick up more at 3.8%. This uptick is in line with national trends. As we were looking at data from the National Student Clearinghouse, community college fall enrollment nationally is up 4.4%. So we're actually a little under that. In Iowa, this growth is not evenly distributed. So if you think about our 15 community colleges and their service regions, we saw 9 community colleges have increased enrollment and 6 have decreased. So more grew than last year, but we still have some institutions that have enrollment declines. Generally speaking, students are continuing to shift as they have been for many years, shifting from full-time to part-time. A third of the students are full-time. Part of that obviously is driven by increased concurrent enrollment. But traditional age student, I think 18 to 24, the student enrollment is also up, while non-traditional student is down a bit. Okay, let's talk about one of the main drivers and something you always seem to want to hear about, concurrent enrollment. So concurrent enrollment, the high school students enrolled in community college coursework continues to grow, up 7.9%. from last fall to more than 40,000 students. As you know, we're a national leader in this space, providing college credit opportunities, but other states are racing to catch up. Nationally, we're slightly below the rate of growth where it is at 8.8%. So while we're still growing at a healthy clip, obviously growing on a larger base, nationally states are moving to catch up. Concurrent enrollment now accounts for 47% of community college headcount enrollment and more than 30% of credit hours. So at some of our colleges, in terms of individual students, more than half of their student body are high school students. Okay, looking at programs, and one of the major areas of growth that we're seeing in the fall data is growth in career and technical education program enrollment. It's up 3.1% with health sciences leading the way. With our guided pathways implementation at our 15 colleges, broadly, we're seeing more students in clear pathways, and you'll see that also reflected in our transfer majors. As you may recall, we implemented a transfer major initiative a few years ago. Basic idea, getting students into clear structured pathways aligned with four-year degrees. Students don't do optional. If we give them clear advising, clear structure, we know that they perform better. The research is really clear about it in terms of student success and degree completion. And the transfer majors have been growing in terms of colleges making them available, getting them offered, and now students enrolling in them. Transfer major enrollment is up 9.6% with business in that space. Shifting to demographics. Nationally and in Iowa, female enrollment outpaces male enrollment. Those of you that are familiar with higher education kind of know how this works. With 57% of the student body generally being female. This fall, male enrollment rose a bit less than female student enrollment, which is opposite of the trend we're seeing nationally. So interesting trend to track there. Total minority student enrollment's down 2.7%, but students identifying Hispanic are up 8.1%.
So the other minority groups are down substantially then?
Yeah, we have not identified exactly what's going on there, but you do see, if you look at the age breakouts, you'll see that we have substantial growth in younger students, slower growth with older students, and we think there may be something there, but quite frankly, we need more analysis and conversation with our institutions to really understand it. You're getting the data first, and it's still very fresh, so we will keep digging into it. One of the things that we look at in fall enrollment are our new students, right? So the students that are new to the community college, and a little over 21% of fall enrollment are new students. It's a greater share than last year. New student enrollment is up 1%, and that's something that we're seeing decreasing nationally. So we're pleased to see that. We also look at immediate enrollees, and those are the students that graduated from high school this past spring that are showing up this fall. Immediate enrollees rose 8.9% this year. 8.9% this year, 8.9% of our students are immediate enrollees, which is an increase over last year. So we're pleased to see more students coming directly from high school into our community colleges.
Jeremy, do you count a student who was co-enrolled in community college as a new enrollee if they graduate and then they enroll?
So if they were in concurrent enrollment and then they're new to the college, yes, we count them as a new student, yeah. Okay, so that's a quick summary of our community college fall enrollment. The one last thing I would say is, so you've got the static report in your packet. On our website, we have substantial data visualization tools where you can take this data, and they're now posted online, and you can slice and dice it if you want to see a particular community college and particular demographics or program data. You can pull that and play around with it and generate really useful charts and tables that can go into slide decks or whatever to gain additional insight. So I'd point you to that if you'd like. If you're a data geek and really want to dig into the numbers, that's the place to do it. So that concludes my report. Any questions about fall enrollment?
Not a question, just a comment. Just a little bit more details were presented at last night's community college meeting, and I always like to ask the question, well, what do you do with the data once it's collected? And Vlad gave me lots of great examples. I'm very pleased to hear that. You gave me what I was hoping to hear.
Right, yeah, the data is really only useful insofar as it improves decision-making, right? And at whatever level that is. And so we really try to focus on that as a team.
Questions for Jeremy? And so we'll see you back here in January again. Huh?
Sounds great.
All right, thanks.
Nice job. Yep, you bet.
Little detail to catch up on before the teacher pipeline briefing. Just any board reports, if they have anything to share for the good of the group?
I'll just mention that I did attend the the Governor's STEM Advisory Council board meeting. And, with the STEM Council now moving and becoming, I guess, the Innovation Division of the Department of Ed. There's a number of transitions that are happening there with the team. Dr. Jeff Weld is going back to UNI as who's been the director for 12 years and has really led much of this initiative and I think established Iowa as a leader in STEM, and then a couple of other staff positions. But I think the makeup of the advisory council and the members of the stakeholders that were there on Monday are still very committed to being engaged and promoting. And the theme of the meeting was sort of stewardship of STEM and saying, how can we continue to make sure that there's a focus on STEM in this new reality? Kind of, I made the analogy that, STEM was sort of a startup that was acquired by the Department of Ed. And now the opportunity is that you're part of a larger organization that has these resources and sort of some additional structure. Sometimes the concern is you lose a little bit of that entrepreneurial spirit and some flexibility and the nimbleness. But I think there's a lot of opportunity and people are still very engaged and will want to continue to be engaged with STEM. And so we're on a good path and we'll continue to see and report out through this board. So I'm very excited about that.
Okay. Any other reporting? Would you like to introduce anybody?
Yes, so just before we transition, I failed to introduce the newest member of our team, Jeremy Anzavino, who will be supporting the board. And I would love, Jeremy, if you could just take a few minutes to introduce yourself and your background.
Thank you. Jeremy Anzavino, raised in Madrid, Iowa, so not too far from here. Went to St. Ambrose University after high school, joined the Marines right out of college, and I was in the Marines for 22 years. And retired back to Waukee, Iowa in 2019. And prior to coming here, I was with HHS, the Child Support Division, and very happy to be part of the team.
Thank you. Yes. And then, of course, just before we transition, thank you so much, Holly, for all of your support in the transition.
Really a needy bunch.
You really are. I know. I email Holly a lot. You're right, Jeremy.
Always ready to.
Just a couple bullet points for me, as I did have a chance to meet briefly with the new president of Iowa Valley Community College. She's on board now, Dr. Ann Hauser-Williams. The predecessor, Fisher, went to Grant Wood.
Kirkwood.
Kirkwood, yeah. Yeah, Cedar Rapids area, yeah.
Yep.
And I did have a chance to visit with a Democrat and Republican legislature regarding the recommendations for the boards and commissions meeting. Those were interesting conversations. And then I think I let everybody know that Mary has accepted the position to be on the college. So they have a gender balance still. That hasn't changed yet. So.
Oh, yeah.
She agreed to do that. Any other items for the board reports?
The last thing I'll share is I had the opportunity to tour the Avenue Scholars Program. That's part of the Des Moines Public School System. It's funded primarily by MidAmerican Energy. They provide, I'm just going to read this from their website because I don't want to misstate. So they provide individualized support services to help eligible students in the Des Moines high schools identify, prepare for, and ultimately enter financially sustaining high-demand careers requiring an associate degree for less. They work with the kids starting their year of high school and continue with them uninterrupted through post-secondary training and for 6 months following career entry. So it's a really cool program that does the public and private partnership within the school district and provides a high level of support to ensure kids are successful. So really cool program to have an opportunity to take a look at. I think it's one of those opportunities that if we get to tour a program, that would be great for us to see, and fully privately funded within the school district. So the school provides them the space to exist within and access to the students, but otherwise completely funded by a private donor. So it's cool to see.
Any other board reports? All right. Jay, take it away.
Jay, just before you jump in, just to frame it up, this is in response to the feedback from the board back in August about wanting to better understand teacher pipeline, potential gaps in teacher pipeline. So we're going to have a now data-driven conversation on that request from August.
Yeah. So thank you, Jay Pennington, your chief of our information and analysis services group. So really the data and analytics part of the K-12 part of the agency. Miriam and I, from her presentation today, are going to tag team this one. There's a lot of data, lots of different sources. Some of it I oversee as part of our fall bed stats collection, which is really who's teaching in Iowa schools today, what are they teaching, what are their salaries, that kind of information. But, there's tons of data. Some Miriam certainly is responsible for. Others come from BOE. So I'll try to, I know we have to be brief, but I'll try to provide a little bit of background about where each of these different data points are coming from. And as Director Snow mentioned, really the goal here is to provide what we know about the teacher workforce in Iowa today. So just a level set, a lot of this we're going to try to provide as much trend data as we have available. I know there's a lot kind of going on here, and I'll stand up just because I like to do that. It's a little bit easier to do that. So the top level, so all these three lines sort of add up to the top level. So the trend is what are the number of educators in the state over the last decade? And as you can see, we have the most number of teachers in the state ever. At the same time, we implemented over the last decade the teacher leadership and compensation system. That's really these two lines. So these add up to be about just over 11,000 folks, teachers are in these teacher leader roles, or about 20% of the overall. And really what this other line represents is those that aren't teacher leaders. So kind of what we're seeing is we've got the most educators in the state. We've got these new roles, these new pathways for teachers to take on these, whether they're a model teacher, a master teacher. At the same time, we're sort of pulling away some of the frontline educators from just pure classroom roles. So we've created a system. And part of the challenges I think that we have is, while there may be vacancies, there are more positions overall within the system over that last decade. Any questions?
I have a question about the teacher leader kind of trends, I guess. When this was implemented, and teacher leader prep, and like kind of the coaching and stuff, was it meant to be that these teachers were going to leave the classroom permanently and never return? Or was it meant to be a temporary, like, I'm going to go be a coach for 2 to 3 years and then return to the classroom?
So it's not a permanent position. Districts, it depends on how they, their review process. It also depends on how they implemented those roles. In some cases, they were entirely coaches. In other cases, they may having a teacher who has a pullout that might be part-time, in which they're going to other classrooms, but they might also have some teaching capacity, but it might be less than what they had before. And in some cases, it's all model and master teachers. But the idea is these aren't like, you don't have rights to those positions. You apply for it annually, and you can be a teacher leader for a few years and then transition out, or you can stay on the entire time.
It is a one-year contract.
Okay, so they had to keep on reapplying, is that what you're saying?
And each district has to have a local review process in terms of how they identify. And create a contract for that individual to get that position for the year.
Okay.
Usually it's a committee of that includes administrators and teachers that make those decisions and recommendations to the school board for approval.
That in the context about the categorical and the flexibility from last session. Either you or Eric.
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing that came out of last legislative session was that districts had the ability to certainly continue with their teacher leadership system as they had put it in place, but then they now have the ability to change that, to use those dollars for salaries, and not necessarily have to implement a teacher leadership system. So it'll be interesting to see we're currently in the midst of that fall collection of who's teaching what their salaries are, what roles they have. It'll be interesting to see what decisions districts make in that flexibility of no longer having to do a TLC program. So how do they feel they should best use those dollars?
Yeah, just having been a part of that initial group, there was always that concern that we would take the best teachers out of the classroom. And a lot of parents didn't like that, the whole idea that we're taking the best people, maybe not necessarily the best, but in many cases, those that volunteered were some of the best teachers in the classroom. And I think that was a give and take. Can we use their expertise to coach teachers to be better than they are now? I mean, it's a whole concept of it. And maybe that's your best people. Maybe it's not, but that was a give and take, Jay. I think when we started out, right? Yeah.
So the other piece too is who are the students in our schools? And so we've had one thing I forgot to highlight. So 10% increase in total positions within that decade. At the same time, we're only seeing a 1.6% increase in the student population. So the number of educators is 5 times higher than the percent increase in enrollment. So we got more teachers and just slightly more students. A little bit about salary. We've got at the top line, the superintendent salaries, principal salaries, and educator salaries. And this represents sort of the year-to-year increases in salary per year. So, as an example, educators saw 2.8% while superintendents saw 2.3%. That's kind of how you can read that. So you could see educators with just under 18%, 21% for principals, and almost 30% for superintendents. So superintendent salaries almost double that of frontline educator over that decade. Switching to teacher retention. So through that fall bed staff collection, we're able to see year to year how many people are still employed within the system overall, whether or not they're a teacher, whether or not they move from a teacher to some kind of administrator or leadership role. And this gives you on the left side beginning teachers, so those that are, haven't passed that initial license, first 2 years of teaching, compared to career teachers. And you can see that there's been a slight decrease in retention. So this is a 5-year retention window. We're looking, in the most recent year, between 1819 and 2023, the literature says, there's sort of this like tipping point within those first 5 years. We see a much larger percent decrease during that window than we would further or later on. So a slight decline in beginning teachers and more of a decline in career teacher 5-year retention. So if somebody moved as a teacher into an administrator role, they would not be considered having been retained as an educator.
So you count them the same, whether they leave education altogether or whether they move to a out of the classroom role?
Correct.
Okay. So you can't really tell where they're going in this case? Are they leaving education?
Yeah, there are some blind spots in the data, and we've certainly been thinking about, are there legislative fixes? Are there ways that we could get that data without that? But that's one thing we don't have. We don't have that exit survey. We don't know if someone decided to retire, if they decided to go into the private sector and leave education entirely, or if they're taking some kind of break, let's say, they wanted to raise a family. Like, we don't have that information yet. I'm always helpful.
If they left the classroom to become like a coach, is that leaving the classroom, or is that still classroom?
We would still consider, so like coach being in that one of those TLC or teacher leadership roles, as long as they're in, they would still be considered retained as an educator within that system. So if they went to special ed and they're still a teacher, they would be considered a teacher. Next, administrator salaries, 5-year retention rates. You could see that we have seen a slight decrease in, over that decade with principal retention in the more recent year, but superintendents has really remained steady overall. So they need to be somewhere employed within the state. We're not getting at like superintendent mobility or anything like that, but just are they, in an administrative role somewhere in a public district? Another thing that we can do is we can take a look at how long someone's been employed. We know their age as well. So we can do some reasonable estimates to figure out whether or not they're going to meet one of the retirement criteria. So that rule of 88, which is, age plus experience to hit that level. So this is a 1-year trend. And the blue really represents that the light blue, 10 to 20% that we're estimating by district in terms of overall retirement. This is a 1-year view, 3-year view. So a lot more blue, getting into darker blue, and that black, sort of really dark navy color is over 30% of your educators in your district are going to hit that rule of 88 in 3 years and in 5 years.
Yep.
So it's kind of a scary picture. I think while that seems like a lot, I think a positive trend that we're really seeing is, so this represents the age, and then I've got the age plus experience view. And then the number of educators, and this is 20 years. The trend line, the 10-year trend line is about the same. The point of this really is that, so while we've got a lot that are eligible to retire in the next 5 years, the educator workforce itself has gotten a lot younger. So as an example, we have 65% of teachers are now 45 years or younger. And a decade ago or 20 years ago, it was 55%. So the overall workforce is definitely younger. And this is age and experience. So 62% are under age 60 in terms of age plus experience. And it was 52% 20 years ago. This is very similar to some of the other data. We're really highlighting the number of full-time beginning teachers. The TLC system was put in place in 13-14. You can see there's more beginning teachers within the system. So as you're creating those roles, you need certainly, you got to backfill for those that are leaving the classroom or going into a particular coaching role. This also highlights that second point. So the number of classroom teachers that have like a teaching assignment has also decreased. So similar to what I showed you in that first figure, Last year, 11,000, just over 11,000 teacher leaders in one of those roles. Again, it'll be interesting to see once we finally have that fall data to see, did this number stay the same or go down? Number of principals is about the same, and number of full-time superintendents over this 15-year window has gone down. A lot of that has to do with sharing arrangements because there's a financial incentive to do that if you're a smaller district, as well as consolidation. And now it's Mary.
And that was a great segue, because if you look at the number of new teachers hired every year in the past 2 years, it's around 1,700. And the total number of candidates we have prepared has either been equal to that in the past year, or in case of this year, it has improved. Now, this one, I'm going to show you this, and then there's another table. This table shows the number of licenses issued by the Board of Educational Examiners. So what you see in the top line is anyone from out of state who have come to the state of Iowa and have received an Iowa licensure in the different years. That has been 742 in 2022, 2023. And the total number of licenses issued to program completers in 2022, 2023 was 2,400, something around that. Now, that number, if you look at the last 2 years, in 2020, 2021, we see a little less than what we see in 2021 and 2022. The reason for that is during COVID, some programs gave the permission to their candidates to graduate later so they can complete their student teaching. Because during COVID, they were not able to complete student teaching. They were exempt. They could go in and teach if they wanted to. But some students chose to wait and do their student teaching and then apply for the licensure. So you will see a little disparity between the number of licenses issued by BOEE to Iowa candidate versus what we have as program completers. But I wanted to bring that to your attention, that why you will see that difference. And then one other piece to remember is for everybody who has applied for an Iowa license that has completed an Iowa Educator Preparation Program, it doesn't mean that they stay in Iowa, but with the fewer number of online programs that we have in Iowa, many of them do stay. Now, there are some programs that we have that are in the border, and so they do have candidates who go to Illinois or they go to Omaha or different states around the state. So that's one thing that we want to be very clear, that necessarily just because they got the Iowa license, they did not stay. Now, if you go to the next slide. This is the total program completers in the state. This one, in the past 2 years, have got us a little excited because we have had an increase in the number of teachers prepared. Since the prior years, it was about 1,700. And last year, the total number of teachers and teacher interns prepared were 1,700. This year, the reports from 2021, 2022 showed that they had increased to 2,200. So that was about 400 increase in the number of teachers prepared and recommended for licensure from last year to this year. The administrators had a little decline, about 65 total decline. Now, something about the administrator, we have about 10 administrator preparations in the state, and the number of administrators prepared don't always go in to become an administrator. So that's something that sometimes they just get their administrator license and they choose to continue to be a teacher or a teacher leader. The other programs like professional school counseling and social workers were kind of the same in the past couple of years. Go to the next slide. We do a state shortage report as a requirement of federal government, and sometimes this report has been misinterpreted. So I'd like to share a little bit information about what this is and what is not. So every state is required to report up to 5% shortage area to the federal government to be considered. Those areas that we share with the federal government will qualify individuals in those areas, in those content areas, to get loans and also some forgiveness on their loans. So what we did up to last year was my first time doing this report, and what we did was a comparison of the jobs posted on Teach Iowa, which all the schools are required to post, and the total number of candidates prepared in those areas that could fill those jobs from the Ed Prep programs. And the difference of that, if we had prepared fewer candidates compared to jobs posted, we counted that as a shortage. Now, while it has some accuracy and it is a federal formula, it's an approved formula for federal government, we were talking, Jay and I and Mike Kevin were talking about what are the areas that we are missing as we are just looking at this data. And some of that was the geographic shortage area, because when we look at the districts, there are so many districts who are showing that they are filling the positions, but there are some districts that always struggle to fill certain positions. So this year, what we have done, instead of using the same formula, we're collecting data directly from the districts to report to us exactly what positions they were not able to fill, so that we can utilize that exact data to report what are the positions that were not filled and have a more accurate way of reporting the shortage.
And those would be math, science, special ed, is that what we're looking at?
Yes, and math, science, special ed are federally shortage areas. So even if we don't report them, those candidates would qualify for those areas to get additional, the funding to have loan forgiveness and things like that. This report is also utilized by Iowa Student Aid Commission to provide that teach grant that is about $4,000. Once the candidate graduates, they qualify for $4,000 a year, up to 5 years if they're serving in those areas that are high need.
Yeah, and just to add a little bit to what Marion's saying, we're going to have better data once we're done with this fall collection. We've got about 80% of districts that have submitted, but we're still working with the rest to get that done.
Yes. Every year we do a snapshot of positions in August. We go to the job board and basically filter the positions, so that, because we always get the hype that, okay, how many jobs are posted, and sometimes it gives us some good data, sometimes it's not very accurate. So something that we have done historically every year in August, between August 20 to 30, we look at the number of jobs posted that are categorized as teaching positions. We remove anything that says instructional para, or if there is anything that says substitute teacher, because if you search for teacher, all of those jobs will show up, but not all the teacher instructional positions. So this table shows you the trend of what we have seen in the job board every year in the August. It is a snapshot. Again, it doesn't include if the district has already filled that position by permission from BOEE to fill that with a long-term substitute or a conditional licensed individual. But if they have had the job posted on the job board, that's included in here. Another table that it was very interesting just to put this table together, because we continue to hear the trend of registration in the educator preparation programs in the whole state, in the United States going down, and the number of registered candidates are low. We have the access to the Title II report, which is also public. And I looked at the trend of registration in Iowa and totally nationally. And this table shows you the overall candidates registered in the teacher preparation or declared major as teacher preparation. It doesn't show how many of them will graduate, but these are the candidates who are registered in the teacher preparation programs. And last year it was 7,773. The year before 7,600, 7,200. So we have had a slight increase in the overall registration based on the Title II report, which all the programs are required to report their enrollment accurately. So
just one other thing too, like not that you guys know all of the titles or memorize them, but just a level set, like Title II is attracting and retaining educators and administrators. And we get about 16 to 17 million a year. Most of that goes directly to districts to help in that capacity.
And there was some questions about some of the things that we do to retain teachers. There is so much that is happening in the preparation programs. So when I saw the data going up, when programs are talking to me, I hear two different mixed messages. I hear from programs that said we have fewer registration, and I hear from programs that are like, we are 50 up, we are 20 up. So I think that that's one thing that we hear, that it's not, while there are some lower enrollment in some programs, there are also increase in some other programs. Now, this also, in addition to programs preparing the candidates, for the beginning teachers, they are required to have at least 3 years of mentorship until they receive their standard license. So that mentorship is provided by the district, and they are required, and they do submit their report on how they plan to provide that mentorship to their new teachers every year in the report that they submit to the department. The districts also have put some efforts towards supporting beginning teachers in addition to the mentoring. So training the mentor teachers, mentoring and induction, and also that some of them choose to continue with the TLC program. They do observing and analysis of the instruction. They provide overseeing for facilitation of the work by the beginning teachers. And also that plan that they have to submit, it used to be the either TLC or other plans that they have, which they are required, and they submit that. Because it is a locally decided program, they still submit that, how they provide that support for their beginning teachers. Also, beginning administrators are required to have some mentoring opportunity. So there is a one-year program that SAI offers, and they also match them with another administrator who is mentor for them and have signed up to work with them in addition to the professional developments that are, of course, offered within the, that are reviewed and offered to them by AEAs.
May I ask a question quickly? Jay, so how do we distribute that 16 to 17 million that we get from the feds? How is that done? And then the second question would be, as a state, what are we doing? Are we doing some things now as a state to attract people to those shortage areas?
So the answer to the first question is there's a formula for the distribution of funds. Part of it is enrollment, part of it is poverty-based as well, but it's prescribed by U.S. Department of Ed.
Okay.
We don't really have a say in that.
Sure.
And then did you want to talk about Title II of HEA real quick?
So one thing that 16 to 17 million doesn't include a carve out that goes to institutes of higher education for some of their work.
Okay.
But you have much more info about that than I do.
Not a fund, but what we do for the recruitment, we share that the data on the areas that are shortage area with the programs, and programs recommend those areas to the candidates. Now, recently with the TPRA program, we also have kind of worked with the district. Basically, the program, Ed Prep programs have worked with the district to prepare the candidates and kind of build that grow your own opportunity. And I see that more Ed Prep programs are now doing that. They kind of collaborate with the district so that they see what are the areas they need, that then they would help support the individuals that may be working as a paraeducator or in other roles within the district, or if they want to onboard somebody, they will be basically bringing them to fill those positions that they need. Or individuals, even the high school students in those districts would be a great area for them to recruit. So those are some areas that the Ed Prep programs are doing to increase that. Did I address that, or are you thinking of Title II grants that was?
No, I think his question, your question more broadly was the efforts of the department.
Yes.
And I think this conversation was important to level set about what our statewide data and what our federally reported data show. So obviously we're seeing big takeaways about the rate of increase in our teacher workforce over the past decade, outpacing the rate of increase in enrollment by 5 times, which is really significant and something we're super proud of. And then also we're seeing positive trends in enrollment in teacher prep programs and newly licensed individuals, both coming out of our teacher prep programs, but then also coming as out-of-state licensed educators and the benefits of the reciprocity that was established for out-of-state licensed educators. So that's all positive trends within our pipeline. At the same time, as Jay indicated, we're working to better understand where gaps do exist, especially in specific school districts, especially in specific types of schools. Oftentimes, nationally, research shows that teacher shortages are concentrated in low-performing or schools identified for improvement, and then also in specific endorsement areas. And anecdotally, in our conversations with superintendents, we're hearing that those gaps are concentrated in special education, EL educators, and then in high school, STEM field science and math. That would also match the national trends, but again, we're working to get better data on that. And then per Miriam's point, she was talking about the teacher and para registered apprenticeship program. In my opening comments in the director's report, when we were articulating those homegrown paraeducators, those homegrown associates who are becoming educators, those are all beneficiaries of that program established by Governor Reynolds just a couple of years ago.
Do we have numbers on that? I mean, who we actually see going through the system?
On the number of, we have information on the number of participants, and then we are not far enough along to have information on full completers for the first tranche. But do you want to?
It's approximately 620 were total. Now, about, I want to say 200 of them are becoming paraeducators, and then 400 something that are going to get their teacher licensure.
Great, good information.
And then just to back up a little bit on the TPRA program, because I think it's been a while since we talked about it. It comes alongside either high school students or individuals with a high school diploma, and pays them at 50% if they have a diploma, at 100% if they are high school students, to attain their para certification. And then for those students who have an those individuals who have an associate degree, it pays for 50% of their salary to, in partnership with a school district and an institution of higher education, attain their bachelor's degree and then their full license. So we're, again, very, very proud of the program and thankful for Governor Reynolds' leadership in it.
Thank you. It's very, very informative. Thank you.
After this round of TPRA is done, I know it's going to take a few years for that, but is there going to be more funding for traditional TPRA, like a round 2 or?
It's a great question. It's one that's been posed by superintendents in our conversations as well. We utilized federal relief funds to make this significant investment. So I think that'll be a conversation that will be had as those funds expire.
Any other questions?
I mean, just a comment on that map, showing retirement timing. And my guess is a lot of positions would look similar in terms of, across the state in terms of job occupations and the availability to retire, just the population. So I'm not surprised by that. I think what's very encouraging is the number of not the number, the average age of your population moving forward, because that's a real indicator then potentially of, right, the longevity of that. So that's very encouraging.
Absolutely, yes. And, so another part to that too, yes, more roles or more teacher leader roles, more roles available overall, and more younger educators, starting with those initial license. So yeah, both of those are good.
Yeah, very good. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you
so much for collecting that data for us.
Well,
yeah,
appreciate your time.
I guess I just requested as more tidbits of information come through to share those, so it's not like a one and done. I don't think this issue is going to go away overnight.
We could solve these super complex problems with just one presentation. That'd be great. Unrealistic. But yeah, I mean, once we get the fall data in, that'll be later this year, certainly can provide an update, like what happened with TLC, what do the overall number of educators look like, those kinds of things.
I'm concerned about rural Iowa too, and the difficulty of rural Iowa to attract enough candidates for jobs. I've said that, I've kind of coined this phrase, necessarily small schools. Seems to me there are necessarily small schools. How do we deal with that? We can't consolidate and expect kids to drive 50 miles to school. So how are we going to do that? And how are we going to provide that education? So thanks for your data. It's really, really good.
Thank you.
All right. School Budget Review Committee.
So from teacher retention to finance?
Yeah.
I'm loving the multiple images. This is like, I'm like the 3 times, like you get like 3 people at once.
Like
It's
a
awesome.
mirror.
I know, it's awesome. That doesn't always happen.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Cassandra Klein. I'm Bureau Chief for the Bureau of School Business Operations. It's nice to be before you all again. I'm going to provide an overview of the action taken at the SBRC hearing that occurred on October 17th of this year. The committee met for its regular October hearing as well as its annual work session. There were 2 committee informational items. One was the final FY24 cash reserve levy limits, which are presented annually in October. Of the 325 districts, there were 180 that were not able to levy. And of the 143 that were able to levy, there were 66 that levied at the max, and there were 2 districts that chose not to levy at all. The total amount levied was just under 166 million, which is about a 13% increase from FY23.
Sandra, for those that weren't able to levy, they had too much in reserve. Is that pretty much the case?
Correct. Yep, it's just a simple calculation of the 20%. The other committee informational item was actually a report of funds used for increased costs related to increased enrollment of the statewide voluntary preschool program. So in the 2021 legislative session, the legislature recognized that there was an increase in enrollment in 2021, or there's an anticipated increase because of the lowered or decreased enrollment because of the pandemic in the fall of 2020. So in normal school finance, the districts are funded based on the prior year enrollment. So for K-12 enrollment, there is already a mechanism for districts who experience increased enrollment to get at least the spending authority related to those additional students. However, for the statewide voluntary preschool program, that mechanism just didn't exist. So the legislature recognized that anticipation of increased enrollment and provided a mechanism for the SBRC to actually award funds for those districts that experienced the increase in costs or increased enrollment. So there were 158 districts that did experience an increase in enrollment. 148 of those used 100% of the funds that were available to them, just over $7.5 million. So we gave a final reporting to the SBRC of that work. The committee also reviewed the late filers for 3 fiscal reports. So that is the certified annual report, which is the fiscal, the special education supplement, which is expenditures related to special education, and the annual transportation report, which is expenditures related to transportation, and which is also used to calculate the transportation equity payments from the transportation equity appropriation. There were 4 districts that did file late at least one of those reports, and all 4 districts will be appearing at the December 12 SBRC hearing to provide a corrective action plan based on that late filing.
Is 4 districts, is that a typical number of schools every year, or?
You know, that's a good question. You know, if we do a trend for the SBRC, usually in December, and we'll show them what it looks like over the past 15, 20 years. And so once the authorization was enacted, we've seen a great decrease down to single digit numbers. And there were actually a couple of years prior to the pandemic where we got to between districts and AEAs just one. And so we did see a little bit of spike after or during the pandemic, just because there were illnesses or you know, a little bit higher turnover than normal, things like that. And so you know, I think we're kind of settling back down into it. Of the 4, they all had 4 very different reasons on why they were late. And so I think it always just depends on what's happening locally.
Repeat offenders, is there a pattern there or not?
You know, for the ones that actually were late this year, we had one of them, Cam, they were also late in FY21. And then Southeast Polk, they haven't been late for a few years, but they did have repeat late filing in fiscal years 12, 13, and 14.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
The final action that was taken by the committee was for Hudson Community School District. They had a request for modified supplemental amount based on asbestos abatement. So they had an instructional space where they were transitioning from kindergarten use to special education use. And as part of that transition, they wanted to install carpet. And to do that, they had to abate the asbestos in the floor tiles first. The committee also held its annual work session. So as part of that, we recognized Director Snow. She is the new chair that presides over the School Budget Review Committee. We also recognized Craig Hansel. He is the new public member who was confirmed by the Senate last year. And he is a retired chief financial officer from Iowa City Community School District. Worked in school finance in Iowa for over 30 years. So we're lucky to have them both on the committee. Other items in the work session, there was some discussion about changing one of the applications for modified supplemental amount based on related costs for open enrollment students that were not on the prior head count. So that new calculation is actually launched today in that application. So that's kind of an exciting opportunity, increased flexibility for school districts. We also reviewed special education weighting scenarios in advance of the action related to special education weightings, which will be taken at the December hearing. We announced the upcoming review of Iowa Administrative Code Rule 289, which is the SBRC rules. We reviewed categorical amounts that will be generated by students that participate in the Education Savings Account program. They'll be generated for school districts. Within that context, we looked at kind of categorical balances statewide, and then the increased uses through the flexibility account or the recent addition of the increased uses for certain categoricals for teacher salary supplement purposes, and just kind of looked at how that might affect some of those categorical balances, which rolls into the final thing, the final item that we looked at, which was which districts or the requirements of districts to appear to provide a fiscal update. So you remember a few years ago, we had a district that had incurred a negative unspent balance for multiple years in a row. And as part of that, the SBRC thought about what they could do from a more proactive nature to help districts just kind of think through their fiscal position. And so they started that practice 2 years ago. And so between the first year and the second year, there were some changes in what that process and those requirements looked like. And so we just reviewed whether we've settled where we think we need to be or whether there were changes based on last year's review. So one of the things that they do within that fiscal update requirement is they look at just the regular program balance, which is taking out those balances related to the categorical funds. And so each year we have a number of districts that would have incurred a negative unspent balance if those categorical balances had been removed. And that's who's required to appear for the fiscal update. And that concludes my report. Are there any questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Great job.
Just a comment on asbestos abatement, where we had situations where the tile did not have asbestos, but the glue that had the tile.
Yes, that's what it is too.
All right, that concludes our business meeting. Have to have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved. Second? Second, all in favor, indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Same sign. All right. We're adjourned. Let's take a 10-minute break. Back about 1:25 or so.
I was like,